Go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Costa. I'm an active transportation advocate and consultant in the Tampa area. And I've been on the CAC for about 2.5 years. I'm appointed by City Councilman Joseph Citro.
Council Chairman.
Right, City Council Chairman Joseph Citro.
Good morning, everyone. Hoyt Prindle. I'm a lawyer here in Tampa. I'm also running for Tampa City Council District 6. For those of you who haven't managed to get that information in your mailbox yet, Commissioner Pat Kemp appointed me, and I have been on this committee since October 2019, so 3 years.
My name is Stephen Hollenkamp. I live in Plant City, appointed by Mayor of Plant City 5 years ago now or so. I now work in the transportation industry, and yeah.
Yep.
That's it.
Good morning, I'm Rick Fernandez, Vice Chair. Been on the committee since 2017, originally appointed by Les Miller and more recently appointed by all of you as at-large member Hispanic community. I'm out of Tampa Heights.
Good morning, I'm Bill Roberts, basically a commercial realtor, and I'm appointed by the Aviation Authority.
Johnny Wong, CPO staff and the CSC liaison.
I'm Don Skelton. I was appointed by the port. I live in Forest Hills. I've been on this committee for about 2 years, just over 2 years.
I'm Ed Majewski, appointed by the Expressway Authority for about 8 months now. I was off for about 6 months. Previous to that, I was appointed by HART for 4 years, and I'm a retired transportation planner.
My name is Christina Bosworth. I am a retiree from Waimama, Florida. I was appointed by Commissioner Mariella Smith, and today is my 1-year anniversary on the committee. So, where's the cake?
Good morning, I'm Nicholas Glover. I'm the advocacy for the chamber, also the HART representative.
All right, are there committee members online that can make self-introductions?
Morning, Terrence Trotz online. I live in the Riverview area, project manager, been on the committee since 2017.
Welcome, Terrence. Someone else?
Good morning. I'm Marty
Sorry.
Fryer. I represent the Transportation Disadvantaged Coordinating Board. I've been a member for approximately 2.5 years.
Morning, Artie. And who else?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Brown, and I am representing Commissioner Gwen Myers. And I've been on the committee for about 1.5 years, retired military, and I have a small local nonprofit that that focus on homeless veterans.
Morning, Carolyn. Welcome. Anyone else?
Morning, Miaza Morrison's on, appointed by Commissioner Cohen. I'm in Lutz, and I've been on the committee now for a little over 1 year, and I am a small business owner.
Very good. Good morning. Anyone else online? Committee members?
Josh Frank, urban designer, town planner, appointed by Jessica Vaughn, Hillsborough County School Board.
That was Josh Frank.
Morning, Josh.
A little garbly, Josh.
Anyone else? Any other committee members? Sorry. Okay. All right.
Chair Roberts, we do have an in-person quorum. Would you please call for a vote of consent for remote participation?
I would. Do I have a motion to allow virtual participation?
So
Nicholas made a motion. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Christine made a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I did want to let you know that Aya Yasin has also logged in.
Oh, good. Okay. We have a good attendance today. All right, at this point, we will open the meeting for public comment. Is there anyone here in the room to make public comment? We will invite anyone online. Seeing no one in the room, is there anyone online to make public comment? Hearing none, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting. And we're now going to recognize a special guest for a presentation, Michael Morano of the West Shore Alliance. Michael, welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you. I'm Michael Marino. I'm the Executive Director of the West Shore Alliance. Thanks for having me today. If I can pull this up. Sorry, is it? Okay. Are we?
For those members online, we're getting Michael's presentation queued up.
Find it. Share my screen. Mike, would you mind hopping in here and helping us out?
Wait, I think I can do it.
See if we can drag it into a folder.
Michael, if you don't mind, while you're getting that set up, I'm going to ask for a motion on the approval of the minutes of our last meeting. I'd like to move that agenda item and approve the minutes of our September meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? Christine?
Mr. Chair, I found a couple of small things in our meeting minutes that I wanted to address. Just in the member comments section, section 8, there are just some misspellings of local roads that were referenced. I don't think it's a big deal, but if anyone were to search for those by their proper names, they'd be missed. I think we have Palm River, or I'm not sure if that's Palm or Balm. Mr. Trott was making that remark.
Okay.
And then Dale Mabry is misspelled.
Okay, good.
So those are the two things I'd like to see corrected.
Good catch.
And, all right.
Excuse me, Chair, I can clarify, that's supposed to be Balm Riverview.
It is Balm.
Thank you for the clarification. Rick Fernandez, you have some comments on the minutes?
Yes, Chair, thank you. A correction to offer on the page 1 of the minutes document, PDF package. In the last paragraph, discussions, under approval of minutes for that section 5. The last line says to be put on the agenda for September 5, 2022. That should be September 7th, 2022. I believe that our meeting was on the 7th, not on the 5th. Also, the one line up from that, notice of intent to rescind a motion to renew, it should be notice of intent to rescind or motion to renew.
Insert the word or.
Insert in place of a. Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Any other corrections to the minutes? We have a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
Second. Oh, was there a motion?
Would you make?
I'll make the motion.
Fernandez make the motion.
Make the motion, I'm sorry.
We have a second. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Anyone online opposed? Motion carries. All right, Michael, now you're set. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Once again, I'm Michael Marino. I'm the Executive Director of West Shore Alliance. Thanks for having me today. I previously appeared before you in 2018, talk about at that time our West Shore Transportation Action Plan, so I'm excited to be here for this update. For those of you who know West Shore and know the West Shore Alliance, we've really spent the last 20 years building up the district, this urbanization of West Shore, but it even goes beyond that. The organization in 1983 was founded, and the #1 priority was transportation. There's an article, the Tampa Tribune, 1983, August, saying our #1 priority is transportation, and that hasn't really changed. And then starting late 80s, early 90s, that's when a lot of the action around the West Shore Interchange and West Shore Boulevard in particular started. The West Shore Interchange, one of the original models or plans for the interchange included 3 punch-through streets, which we'll talk about today. And West Shore Boulevard at one point was designed to be a 6-lane highway. And the Alliance, in addition to business owners in the community, made sure that didn't happen and proposed a Grand Boulevard plan, which is still working towards today. You see here in 2022 and 2023, we are working on updates to our overlay district and also our action plan update for next year. So I mentioned our action plan. When we brought this to you in 2018, you had those 104 projects. And since then, we've had a lot of action on these projects. You see a lot of the road projects that move forward because a lot of the road projects are connected to the West Shore Interchange moving forward. Some of those road projects have the pedestrian and bike projects, so you see some movement there. But you see there's a real lag on transit. And so we've kind of developed this philosophy that we know the roads are going to get built. It's the transit and pedestrian access that's harder to get moving forward. So that's a lot of our leaning from an advocacy side of things. With the interchange is making sure it gets done the way we want it to be done, but a lot of the active advocacy in terms of getting it into the pipeline is with that transit and pedestrian aspect. And so 2 of the examples that we have moved forward there, the bottom left, you see the Gray Street Bicycle Boulevard. That is in design with the city of Tampa. That, in our opinion, is a connection between the Tampa Riverwalk and the Howard Franklin Trail and the Courtney Campbell Trail. That's the east-west connection that will link the Riverwalk and the bay together. And then you see Boy Scout Manhattan traffic signal. That actually came from the residents of the neighborhood, Lincoln Gardens, Carver City. In addition, we've heard responses from parents who go to send their children to Roland Park, to Jefferson High School. There's no stoplight at Boy Scout Manhattan. So when we proposed this in 2018, we brought it forward to FDOT and they said, okay, like we'll consider it. But then the TPO staff in 2020 said, no, we're going to put this in our plan. We're going to put this in the tip. And so by doing that, what happened was in 2020 and 2021, and even this year, there have been fatal crashes at that intersection because people cannot navigate the size of the intersection, but also the elevation changes. So now FDOT has contributed money for design and construction of that traffic signal, hopefully by 2025. But it got the ball rolling because we had the action plan and the TPO staff stepped up and put it into the tip. So I mentioned the interchange. This new grid, this has not existed in West Shore, possibly really ever, because when the interstate was originally built, most of West Shore was cow pasture and swamp. So if you do these 3 punch-throughs, which are hopefully done by 2030, you open up everything west of West Shore Boulevard for redevelopment. And west of West Shore Boulevard, you really can't build residential because of the being underneath the airport runway. So that's an opportunity for more commercial. And if you add more commercial in that area, well, then other parts of West Shore can redevelop into a more residential district, which we're already seeing today. So you see this map. This graphic is actually the West Shore master plan that dates back to 2012, and we're in the process of updating. But everything else on this map is not guaranteed. So all these complete streets, this pedestrian access, the transit and local access, the regional access, these are all things that exist somewhere. They either exist in the tip, the LRTP, city's plans, county's plans, HART's plans, someone's plans, but none of this is guaranteed. When the interchange is rebuilt and those 3 cut-throughs go through, it allows West Shore Boulevard to become that Grand Boulevard because now we're dispersing the traffic. Lois Avenue is actually a very dangerous street because it has to take out so much traffic, but it goes through a residential neighborhood on both sides of the interstate. So Lois can have a road diet and add pedestrian elements there. On Spruce Street, there are 10-foot ditches on the sides of Spruce Street that you can't put a sidewalk there. And so this city has talked about capping that trail, making a trail of that. And I mentioned, with the pedestrian access, having gray be the option. That's that bottom green line, the southernmost green line. When West Shore Plaza is redeveloped, you'll be able to go from West Shore Plaza down Gray. Gray basically dead ends where Cash Street cycle track picks up. So you're going to have this safe pedestrian corridor all the way from Ybor City through downtown, the Riverwalk, through West Tampa, through West Shore, all the way to the bridges. And I told someone the other day, you'll be able to ride your bike from downtown Clearwater or downtown St. Pete to Ybor City. And they looked at me like I was crazy until I showed them this map. Once you see the lines on the map, you know it's real. So we as an organization obviously promote development and the development connection between transportation. You've driven around West Shore, you've seen a lot of the development that's moved forward. The interchange is just one part of this. The redevelopment that was happening at West Shore Plaza, it's already happening at West Shore City Center, it's already happening at Midtown, and then the Intermodal Center, which is where the DoubleTree is right now. We actually had our development forum in August at the DoubleTree. We had about 300 people there. We held it at the DoubleTree because we know in about 6 months to a year, that building's gone. And it's an example of how West Shore is redeveloping, that what was there in the 70s and 80s is now evolving into this modern use, mixed use development. And hopefully, obviously, you see there Intermodal Center and having access to Primo Transit. So that's my presentation, and I'll stand for any questions.
Michael, questions from the committee and in the room? Boy.
Hey, Michael, I had a question that you made a comment about the Lois road diet. Is that something that FDOT has actually specifically stated they have interest in once they're able to make these additional connections, or is that just kind of something you were proposing?
So it's a city project.
Okay.
They have in the past tried to get state funding for it, through line items. There's talk about going for federal funding, but Lois and Spruce in particular, they take on a lot of the business traffic, but those are in residential communities. And there's redevelopment potential at Spruce and Lois, where there's a city-owned solid waste site. So fixing those two roads is not just critical for the safety standpoint, but also having there be sustainable redevelopment in those corridors.
Does the city have kind of a proposed area where that road diet would occur? Because I know in many cases, FDOT, especially when it comes to freeway interchanges, does not want to permit kind of narrowing of lanes. Like you had that issue with Ashley Drive where there's kind of a lot of pushback in terms of narrowing the road.
So between Cypress and Spruce, you could pull it off. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll do it, because one of the things that they're trying to get a hang on is how much pedestrian access can you have on the sides? Ideally you want like an 8-foot sidewalk. But if you go out to Lois today, it's 4 lanes with a narrow median and the standard 5 to 6 foot sidewalk on the edges. So if you squeeze the curbs in, where are you losing the space? And so that's something that they're trying to get a hang on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Ed?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm amazed when I drive like to International Mall and I see these, very new condos or apartment buildings, and I'm just curious. Are you finding that people that are living there are actually working in the West Shore area?
Yes. So we do a biannual district survey. And one of the things that we find in that survey is that about 65% of the respondents who live in West Shore work in West Shore.
That's impressive.
And then if you do the census on the map type of data, it's about 20% from the census data who live in West Shore also work in West Shore. That's actually a higher percentage than downtown. So the beauty of West Shore is that you do have those new condos coming in, but there's also well-established single-family neighborhoods. So if you do have that mix, and there's a desire, we know from our surveys, there's a desire of people who are living in the multifamily to then purchase a home in the West Shore district.
Other questions? I have at least one, Michael. And thanks for bringing this presentation. I haven't had a chance to study the recent master plan, but I'm curious what provisions the West Shore Alliance is considering for the intermodal center that FDOT has proposed on Cypress. Can you describe how or if that's included in your plan?
Well, I mean, if you kind of look at this image, this is what's from, sorry, the bottom right here. Yeah, this is pulled from FDOT. The conversations that we have a lot are based on what ends up being the technology that goes into that site. You know, is it some form of rail? Is it local bus? But that site is primed for redevelopment because Trask has that cut through right there, but also the access to the interstate. So it's going to be attractive for some developer, whether it be residential or commercial or hospitality, to come in and take over that site. But there has to be an accommodation for some form of transit. So is it sort of like a Miami Central, Bright Line station where, first floor is retail, second floor is a transit plaza, and everything above that is private development? I think that would seem to make the most sense, but we don't have any sort of, prescribed notion of what that building should be, other than something that we think a P3, public-private partnership, would be the most likely option.
But you're at least reserving the possibility of a transit intermodal station at that location in your plans, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then secondly, Christine, just a moment. And secondly, you mentioned the Manhattan intersection. Is there anything that the TPO or more specifically this committee could do to accelerate that project or reduce deaths at that intersection?
I honestly, I don't think so. I mean, it's in, FDOT has made the funding for designs and they've contributed the funding now for construction. You can't make things go faster. The most important thing is to get the money there, and so that we've accomplished that so far.
Okay. That changes, come back and let us know. Christine.
Thank you, Michael. This is a great presentation. I have the benefit of knowing this area very, very well, and I regularly use my electric bike to go and conduct meetings and see people in the West Shore District. I wonder, Michael, if you have anything, and also when we've done assessments at Tampa International, which has 10,000 employees, when we do assessments at International Plaza, as Ed mentioned, we see bicycles everywhere. Because what you have in a business district like this is a very vibrant restaurant scene, not small local restaurant for the most part, but real big restaurants. And that creates a lot of multimodal transportation needs for the back of house people or in the hospitality industry. So there's a great need, and I just encourage everyone here, when you go to International Plaza, look under Bay Street, do your personal observations there. My question to Michael right now is, I'm finding when I go in and out of the district that it would be nice to have a complete street on Lois and West Shore, but what I also find is a great need to just cross those streets, like at Gray and at other locations. Do you think there's anything that can be done just to make for safe crossings?
Yeah, so one of the conversations we've had with the city is with Gray Street in particular, can we do some of the intersections here? So what is being shown here is the lowest intersection. Make this a flashing hazard for bicyclists. Gray Street at West Shore Boulevard and at Dale Mabry already has a full-blown traffic signal. At Himes, if you notice, the city did this intentionally. It's a plastic curb in the median, so they could just unscrew the thing and put a bike path through it, or put a safer pedestrian corridor through it. Now McDill and some other streets as you get closer to Howard Armenia, you have to deal with on Gray. But what Christine describes is absolutely true. We don't know this for certain, but I would guess we probably have more bicycle commuters than transit commuters in West Shore, because it's on a street like Boy Scout Boulevard, you riding your bike, even if you're on the sidewalk, is easier than taking the bus. And you're gonna be, and they get faster than the bus. And when we've talked to International Plaza, we asked how many transit riders do you have? They said we don't have that many. We have more bicyclists who come onto the property. And that's why they have a very large parking area. But that is something else to consider too, is, as you go through your work, and I know you do focus on this, but, the safety of the bicyclist commuter who's doing it because they have to. And, not everyone is riding a $10,000 bicycle and spandex. It's a guy wearing black pants, black shirt, black apron, because he's got to wipe down tables, later on that day.
Good question. Any other questions? Any questions from the committee members online?
Yeah, yes. Chair, this is Artie Fryer. I'd like to pose the question. I heard the comment about Lincoln Gardens in Carver City. In regard to the impact to those communities, those are mature neighborhoods. So I'm particularly interested in any comments in terms of information that residents may have contributed to the design and the impact that it affects those residents, particularly because many of them probably are older, have lived there quite some time, and this is certainly or changes in the general area. So I'd like some conversation about the impacts and the comments from those residents.
Sure, and I have another meeting at 10, so I'll have to wrap up early, but there is what's called the West Shore Residential Neighborhood Improvement Committee. So that's a collection of the neighborhood and civic association leaders in the district that we meet with on a regular basis. The city of Tampa also participates in that. I meet with the local neighborhood association presidents fairly regularly. I actually met with Lincoln Gardens, Carver City, Patricia Gibbons, their president, about 2 months ago. We make sure that they are informed. Occasionally, obviously, there are times when development conflicts with what their needs are, but on transportation and infrastructure, we're pretty tight at the hip, because the fact that, for example, like Spruce, where you have a 10-foot ditch that the mom and baby can't walk on it, but the building on the side of the road either is eroding into it. So it doesn't, that connection of transportation where it's a quality of life issue and an economic development issue. So we have that synergy there. And the last thing I'll add to, these projects aren't necessarily, these projects are not designed by the West Shore Alliance. These projects all exist in someone's plan. But we provided this blueprint for the district because there wasn't one place you could go to find all this stuff. And because we represent the business community, there may be neighborhood-centric projects that are not reflected in this plan. For example, Lincoln Gardens, Carver City needs sidewalks to access to Laura Ingram Rec Center. Well, those sidewalks are in the single-family neighborhood. They would not be reflected in this plan, but they are reflected in the City of Tampa's plan.
Good point. Johnny, did you have?
May I ask one other question,
Yes,
Chair?
Sorry.
Just quickly, in regard to business owners that are connected with that Lincoln Gardens, Carver City area, are any of them members of the Alliance, or are they able to be members?
Yes, I mean, they're absolutely able to be members. There are businesses within the Lincoln Gardens, Carver City boundary that are members. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say, though, that the members that we have are reflective of the residents in the community. For example, the barbecue restaurant on Hubert is not necessarily is not a member of the Western Alliance, but businesses on Cypress and Lois are members of the Western Alliance. But I don't want to. I would not say that we have the super small businesses like a small restaurant that's a member, but they are all engaged through our district survey, as I mentioned, and also when we do these programs and projects, we do public outreach as a part of our responsibilities in working with the City of Tampa.
Thank you, Artie. Johnny?
I only want to say thank you, Michael, for coming, and we appreciate the partnership with West Shore Alliance, and it's been a huge success. I think it's a good example of what happens when the community calls our attention to an issue. Lois Ave Complete Street Project and Manhattan Boy Scout Traffic Signal Project are great examples of community saying they have an issue. We dug into the data, prioritized it, and now as a result, both of those projects are programmed within the next 5 years. So great success, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, and I have another meeting today with our organization at 10, and we have a board meeting later today. But one of the things that I'll add to, the TPO staff has been very helpful. We did a presentation last year where we took data that Johnny and his staff provided of deaths and serious injuries on roads in the district. And I believe it was 17 in 2021 alone. And we were able to document how the numbers have been going down, but they went back up in 2021. And having our members understand that data, even if they don't live in the district, these are their employees. And in many cases, these are the employees who are in these crashes. And as they are trying to have people come back to the office on a regular basis, it's really hard to convince someone to come back to the office if their commute is dangerous one way or the other as a pedestrian or as a driver. So the data is very helpful for us. And we appreciate the TPO staff as well.
Well, thank you, Michael, for coming. I know you have a long history of interest in transportation. We're glad to have you at the helm of the West Shore Alliance.
Thank you.
All right. Members of the committee, we'll move now into our action items. First item is going to be presented by John Wong. That is the attendance review and declaration of vacant seat. Dr. Wong.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll present this item from my chair. So at the last meeting, you all requested to review the attendance roster in a little bit more detail, and I want to open it up to the committee. You all are free to take any motions that you feel necessary to ensure that the committee is functioning properly. As you can see from the attendance roster, there have been a few members that have not been able to attend according to our requirement as outlined in the bylaws, which states that if any member misses 3 or more consecutive meetings, the committee can then take an action to vote to remove them. That is a committee decision, so it is in your hands. I provided you with the information requested on the attendance roster, and I'll turn it over to you all.
All right. This roster was part of our packet, and happy to have any discussion on this item. Ed, you want to come in?
Well, I was prepared to make a motion.
Okay.
I would move that we vacate Councilman Maniscalco's appointee and the persons under 30 member at large.
Okay. Persons under 30 would be Jonathan Knudsen, Councilman Maniscalco, which is Nicole Weiss. We have a motion. Is there a second to declare those seats vacant?
May I ask a question and possibly follow up with a friendly amendment to that
Let me find a
motion?
second to the,
Okay, sorry.
vote to the motion first. Is there a second to the motion? Maniscalco, second. All right, now Christine.
My question is, are those persons, City Councilman Maniscalco, is he alerted so that he has opportunity, or any person making the appointment, are they, does staff engage them before their seat is vacated through this motion so that they have an opportunity if that's something they want to deal with and restore?
Thank you. That's a really good question, Christine. So we usually reach out to the appointing official as a last resort. If a member has missed 2 or potentially 3 meetings in a row without contacting us in advance, letting us know that they were absent either due to like illness or family issue, any personal issue, then we'll reach out to them by email as a touch point, say, hey, I hope you're doing okay. Please let us know if we can do anything to help you attend, and get back to me as soon as possible. If they communicate with me and say, yeah, I've been having issues, I'll try to make it to the next meeting, usually leave it at that. If they fail to respond after the fourth absence or potentially even more, reach out to the appointing official and let them know, hey, sorry, we haven't seen this person in a while. They're jeopardizing our ability to make a quorum. We're not sure if they're still interested in serving. Would you like to get in contact with them, or would you like us to spell out some next steps that you could take to replace them? In this specific instance, I did reach out to Nikki on a few occasions. She corresponded with me some months back, but the last 2 emails I sent her weren't returned. I did forward my email thread to Councilman Maniscalco, and he's awaiting our guidance.
Okay. I want to make sure that I make a motion I offer this friendly amendment that we vacate those seats once the appointing official, if there is one, is given 30 days notice or advised of our motion.
Yeah, thank you. The appointing officials are free to replace their appointments at any time. If, for example, an elected official said that this person isn't serving my interests anymore, they could replace them at any time without any formality. In the case of like a CAC member not fulfilling their duties or not being able to serve or interested in serving, we would again reach out to that official and let them know and give them an opportunity to review some candidates, or maybe they have someone in mind. But we definitely try to take a sympathetic approach whenever we reach out. We don't want to ring anyone's alarm by saying, hey, did you know your appointee isn't doing their job? Because things happen. And in these 2 instances, I think they're probably just not interested in serving anymore.
Right.
I'm sorry, was that an amendment?
So she's all.
Yes, I offered a friendly amendment. Make a motion.
I guess my only comment is that it seems to me, based on what Johnny said, that they're really kind of already doing that. So I'm going to say I'm not opposed to your amendment, but I'm not going to accept it.
Well, at this point of order, Christine, do you mind stating what your amendment is, just so that we can understand whether we need to second it or not?
Yes. Do you want to start by saying what your motion is?
My motion was that we vacate Councilman Maniscalco's appointment and the persons under 30 member at large.
And
And
that motion received a second.
Yes, it did. And I made a motion that we modify that to be, to include, and that the elected officials are given 30 days notice of the vacating of their seats being vacated.
Okay, so Christine's amendment is to provide for 30 days notice to the elected official who appointed the committee member. Is there a second to that amendment? Is there a second? Anyone on the line care to second the amendment? I'm afraid your amendment dies for lack of a second. All right. Is there further discussion on the motion? And I think Johnny's answer, Christine, in all fairness, is
Oh, I agree.
they're making those aware.
Yeah.
You're simply declaring the seats vacant. Certainly will notify the appropriate persons. Right. Okay. Now, Hart.
Question, and then I'm going to make a motion. So Johnny, did Nikki say, what, I mean, she was a pretty active member of this community. I don't know Mr. Knudsen, I maybe have seen him once. I guess I'm just a little, I know you said that you don't think there's interest, but I'm just, if you're willing to share, curious what the past.
Yeah, sure. So I say that based on my previous interactions with Nikki. I have contacted her about transportation topics in the past, and she was always very quick to respond. I did reach out to her back in, let's just say earlier this year, to let her know that she was at risk of reaching those 3 consecutive absences, and told her that she will need to attend if she's interested in serving. And she said, yeah, no problem. She did attend the next meeting. Since she's had 3 more consecutives, I've reached out to her twice, no response.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, Ed.
My recollection is that the last meeting that she attended, she verbalized the fact that she thought she was wasting her time.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to vacate these 2 seats. I mean, this is in our bylaws. It's something that we've not focused on certainly in the past. Rick?
Yeah, just a question for Johnny. Heaven knows I was ready to make the same motion as to Knudsen. Stated that at the last meeting. But was there a similar outreach to Knudsen, and did he respond to you in some fashion?
Yeah, I sent both he and Nikki the exact same email, and I didn't receive any response from Jonathan.
Okay, cool beans. Okay, thank you.
Any discussion from committee members online? Dwight, you have a further comment?
I'd like to make a motion that we split these 2 votes into individual votes.
Ed, would you find that acceptable to vote on them separately?
I guess. I don't see the point to it, but okay.
Don, would that be acceptable to you as the second? All right. If the committee pleases, we'll vote on those separately. Any further discussion on the motion? We'll vote on the 2 positions separately. The first position, all in favor of vacating the seat appointed by Councilman Maniscalco, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that seat is declared vacant. The next question is to declare the position for the persons under 30 to be vacant. All in favor of declaring that seat vacant, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, I think the motion passes, both motions have passed.
Mr. Chair, point of order, sorry.
Yes.
I was going to ask for, it's maybe spelled out, for demographic appointments. Do those bubble up this committee, or are they at the recommendation of the commission?
Are you talking about at large?
Yeah. Because under 30 is so important. I just want to make sure that we're getting the right kind of pool of people.
I could take a stab at answering that, but I'm going to ask Johnny to drive the process.
Okay.
Excuse me, Chair, for everybody in the room, if you wouldn't mind speaking up, we're having a little bit of a difficult time hearing you.
Thanks.
Mr. Glover asked about what's the process for filling these vacant seats, particularly at large seats.
Thank you for that question. So according to the bylaws as they exist today, those seats that are reserved for specific demographic groups, TPO staff brings a list of potential candidates before this committee. And traditionally, you all have asked them some interview questions and then made a motion to accept one of them to fill that at-large seat. We decided earlier in this year that for any seats that are currently vacant, we would hold off until the CAC organizational structure is decided, and hopefully that wraps up today. Fingers crossed.
Okay. Rick Fernandez, do you have a comment or question?
No, I guess it crosses over both in a way. At our last meeting, David Bailey was in attendance virtually. Now, I love David, great guy. He's been a great member of the committee. But he is one of those members who has been absent several times. He's Commissioner Overman's appointee. David did comment that he had business conflicts that were keeping him away, and he was hopeful that he would be able to step up his attendance in the future. But he's not here today. So I'm curious if there's been any further communication with David, if we have any insights as to when or if we might see him again on a continuing basis. Johnny, do you know?
I only know what the committee knows. I remember at the last meeting exactly what you just shared. David said that he had some work commitments that he hoped to resolve soon. I don't, well, I shouldn't say I don't know. I do know that he hadn't emailed me to declare whether he was gonna miss this meeting or attend. So,
Because this would be his 5th absence, not including the July 2022 optional meeting. I would just ask that you reach out again and perhaps if you haven't, communicate with Commissioner Overman and ensure that she knows. I know I made comment to this effect at the last board meeting to them, and I was making public comment. So if they were awake, they know that there's a problem, but I don't know that they were awake. The other individual, and I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, life is tough. Allah Yassin, I'm sorry if I am mispronouncing that. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 absences over the course of the year since January 2022. Ms. Yassin, you're here today and welcome, but if I may, Chair, or I'll ask the Chair to pose the question. I would just like to understand the reason for the absences and if we might see something different from her attendance in the coming months. I know it's a Temple Terrace appointment. We have no authority over it, but we could make a recommendation. That's all I have there. If you care to answer, fine. If not, that's fine too.
All right, if you care to respond.
I would like to answer actually. So the problem is actually the time of the meetings. The meetings are usually held during the day and I have a full-time job. So it's really difficult for me to take time off to be able to attend in person or, and I am only able to attend virtually when I'm able to take some time off from work. So that is, so the problem, my problem is not that I'm not interested. I'm very interested in being on the committee. However, the time of the meetings are not convenient for people who have full-time jobs and need to attend to them. So I recommend that maybe we can have the meetings in the afternoons or like evenings, such as like the other meetings.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. That's exactly why our reorganizational plan does include moving the meetings to a more convenient time in the evening. So I appreciate your interest and your participation today. Any other comments on this item from the committee? Thank you, Ed and Don. All right, so we vacated 2 seats and we have a question on one of them. Next item on our agenda is the tip amendment for the walk-by safety outreach and the HART passenger ferry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brad Matthew. I'm the GIS project manager for the TPO. We have 2 amendments for you today, the walk-by safety outreach and the HART new passenger ferry grant. The first 2 amendments, they were requested by FDOT to add funds for the fiscal year 23-27 tip. The walk-by safety outreach is going to be conducted by DOT. They'll be doing some geofencing on some roads on the high injury network. So if you happen to cross over the area, your phone's Bluetooth enabled, you'll start to receive safety messages to your phone. This slide here shows the funding for fiscal year 23 of the $401,000. And the next amendment is the HART new passenger ferry grant. HART received an award of $6 million from the US DOT. The funds will be used to purchase a new ferry to replace the existing one that's currently in use right now. It will still be using the same route that's currently called the Cross Bay Ferry. They're also looking at a ferry that will be of similar design to protect the passengers from the elements. And this slide here shows the just over 4.8 million from FTA, local funding at 1.2 for the total of just over 6 million. And for our public outreach as part of the newly adopted public participation plan amendments, We posted an issue of the newsletter release on social media. We published a webpage and posted a sign at the downtown Tampa Convention Center. And we are recommending approval of the 2 amendments for the fiscal year 23-27 TIP and recommending approval to the TV award. That's all I have for you guys today. Any questions?
Okay, questions from the committee? Questions, committee members in the room? Christine?
This is good stuff in my book. Roger, these alerts, I think there was this has already been utilized on the Courtney Campbell.
Correct.
There was that. So maybe you could just give us a word on that for people who aren't familiar with it. But my question is, do motorists get text alerts from the system while they're en route? Doesn't that inspire behavior that we don't want, or does it come after they've traversed the high crash corridor?
That's a good question. I know if you're walking or biking, I don't know about driving. I have not had the opportunity to use or participate in a project that had geofencing.
Okay.
Johnny?
Can I take a stab?
Yeah.
So I think that the project for walk bike outreach that we're going to do here is kind of borrowing a page from what Pinellas has done successfully. I don't know the details. I've never been lucky enough to receive one of those messages, but we've heard from Pinellas County that they've been very successful. Specifically here, I don't think that drivers are going to be the intended audience or the target audience for these. The walk bike outreach is going to collect data, so it'll let us know how many cyclists and pedestrians are using these high injury network roads as a path to get to their destination. And then secondly, because we have the ability to, DOT is going to push out notifications to them, giving them safety messages like, hey, be sure to slow down, cross at crosswalks, wear a helmet, those kind of things. We don't know the full extent of all the messages that will be transmitted, but looking to Pinellas as a model, those messages seem kind of likely.
Okay. Thank you, Johnny. I'm going to support that motion, but I would like to be on record as it's largely understood now that messages that are intended for system users that basically say, don't use the system in the manner in which it was designed, like use a crosswalk. Well, that's great if we have safe crossings frequently enough, or so that's, it's a little, I'm a little uncomfortable with that, not knowing what those messages are going to be. And sometimes we have victim blaming in advance that comes through this kind of messaging. So, but I will be supporting that. Thanks.
Thank you, Christine. Other questions or comments from the committee? Committee members online, is there anyone with a question or a comment? All right, here. I'm sorry, who's that?
Yeah, this is A. Yassin. I would like to start a motion for approval.
All right, we have a motion for approval. I assume that's for both amendments to the tip, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, we have a motion for both.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, remote members can make motions. I know they can vote.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's a second, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Glover seconds the motion. Is there other discussion on the 2 tip amendments? Anyone online have further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the 2 tip amendments as proposed, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the motion passes. Thank you all. Appreciate it. All right, thank you, committee. We'll make those recommendations then to the TPO being approved. The next item on our agenda is item C, Health Impact Assessment of the 2045 LRPT Complete Streets Project. Barbara, morning.
Good morning. Dr. Barber, TPO staff here. Yeah, I'm going to get this a little bit more visible for you all.
I'm here to present on our health impact assessment of our 2045 long-range transportation plan complete street projects. Let's see. A little bit of project background. This project was requested by the TPO board as part of our last Unified Planning Work Program. The board requested that we do a health impact assessment of our entire long-range transportation plan, but due to a large budget that would require, we really decided to focus on the complete street projects in our plan. A little reminder, the TPO passed a health and all policies resolution in 2019, created a health atlas, and we've really been trying to make strides to integrate health concerns into all areas of our planning process. We're looking to do a few things with this project, including better understanding the relationship between health outcomes, urban design, mobility, demographics, and socioeconomics. And we're looking to better understand how the implementation of complete streets would impact public health conditions and reduce risk levels, as well as identifying prioritization and urban design factors to ensure more equitable and impactful improvements as a result of our projects. We work towards this by partnering.
Can you X out so the screen's not blocked? There we go.
Nice.
We partnered with BHB, our consultant, to develop a healthy mobility model. This integrates healthy community design principles and uses GIS and readily available data in order to analyze land use, urban design, and mobility factors, establish baseline health conditions, forecast community health outcomes, and identify and prioritize improvements that can contribute to better community health. The first step to developing our community health risk assessment. This assessment helps to provide a baseline form of statistical analysis and comparison, and allows us to identify urban design and mobility factors that have a statistical relevance to chronic health conditions. Without getting too much into the weeds, that's what this looks like. This is an aggregate of 6 chronic disease risk factors. The score is distributed along the normal curve, and you can see areas that have poor health outcomes, to average health outcomes to good health outcomes. In addition to the countywide analysis of health conditions, we chose 5 study roadways based on context classification for 3 major reasons. To help better understand the complex relationship between health outcomes and urban design, mobility, environment, demographics, socioeconomics in localized areas. Really kind of that context-sensitive approach. We also wanted to provide examples on how the analysis of this through this project can be used to guide transportation and design improvements on a project-by-project basis, and to serve as typical sections to better understand how the 350 miles of complete streets in our long-range transportation plan can improve health outcomes county-wide. And just a little bit about the health indicators in these areas. You can see how different health outcomes are across the county and localized areas. For example, the area around Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard has higher disease prevalence than the rest of the county in all areas. There's a few others that have kind of more localized issues. Platt and Cleveland, for example, have higher rates of asthma and poor mental health, for example. So back to the statistical analysis, the county-wide one. We used health as the dependent variable, and the rest of these items, transportation, demographics, access and urban design, environment, economics, were the independent variables. So the model ultimately told us whether a particular independent variable was statistically correlated with health outcomes, as well as the directionality of that correlation. Some variables were, of course, not statistically significant, and some were ultimately thrown out as a result of validation issues or correlation bias. One of the major areas we looked at for statistical significance was demographics and economic characteristics. We found that by and large, these areas are significantly related to health outcomes. The county has large gaps in education, poverty, incomes, as well as rent and transportation cost burdens, and that more often than not, these are very heavily correlated with health outcomes, both for particular chronic diseases such as asthma, chronic or heart disease, as well as the aggregate health risks across the county. We can spend a lot of time kind of discussing the implications of, the relationship between these characteristics and health outcomes. But for example, the chart on the right shows the relationship between health outcomes and educational attainment. And it's clear that areas with the highest rate of low educational attainment have worse health outcomes. To further illustrate this, we examined the relationship between environmental justice areas, that is, low income and minority neighborhoods, and health outcomes. And you can see that by and large, environmental justice areas were significantly more likely than non-environmental justice areas to have health outcomes that are below average. In addition, we looked at urban design, environment, and factors in their relationship to health there. What we found was that in terms of transportation, areas with a higher share of car commuters, longer commutes, areas with high crashes, and higher shares of populations with no access to a vehicle were associated with the most poor health outcomes. In terms of urban design and access, street intersection density and walkability were associated with improved health outcomes. We didn't see any significance for bikeways and greenways in terms of health outcomes, but that could be as a result of a lack of a critical mass of facilities that would show that. So this is a very localized analysis. It's not something you might see in other areas. In terms of environmental exposure, high traffic proximity and poor air quality was associated with poor health outcomes across the board, to be expected. The chart on the right, you see the relationship between environmental justice areas and air quality. You can see that air quality is worse in environmental justice areas typically. And some examples at the localized area. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard between I-275 and 40th Street is an environmental justice area. There's inconsistent, low quality sidewalks, but it has a high walkability score, high intersection density. Has a lot of crashes, it has a lot of Superfund sites, it has high traffic proximity, and it has poor health outcomes in all categories. So you can kind of see at the local level how the countywide analysis doesn't really tell the whole story. Similar with Lithia Pinecrest, not a lot of pollution, not a lot of traffic, not a lot of crashes, but a lot of vehicle miles traveled in the area, high transportation cost burden, not a lot of intersection density, not a very walkable area, but no real red flags for health outcomes. So it kind of illustrates the importance of taking a context-sensitive approach to any given roadway that we're examining. Some key takeaways from our study. An unequal distribution of wealth and resources is related to poor health outcomes across the board. Higher traffic proximity and poor air quality was also associated with poor health outcomes across the board. Street intersection density is associated with better health outcomes. You can see the relationship between traffic proximity and environmental justice areas in the histogram on the right. So what's really come out of this study so far is some prioritization principles for us to move forward with. When prioritizing locations, funding distribution, treatment types, we're suggesting that we prioritize projects in environmental justice communities, as social inequity is a major driver of health disparities, as well as focusing complete street improvements on health burden communities as well. And then in terms of the kind of projects we should be supporting that would improve health outcomes according to our study, projects that improve active facilities, reduce traffic proximity and air pollution, projects that improve safety, particularly in urban context classifications, as well as projects that incentivize non-car commutes. So some recommendations. These are planning level recommendations to address health and safety issues. Really looking at the opportunity to, do spot treatments, and then, we've provided in the study as well some typical sections to kind of display the relationship between, the outcomes of the study and how that can be implemented at the local level. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, for example, 4-lane road, 40 miles an hour, infrequent transit service, no dedicated space for folks on bikes, really poor health outcomes across the board. And so kind of some examples of some complete street treatments that could be used to improve health, stuff like street trees, 10-foot shared use paths, some roadway narrowing, a road diet, intersection improvements, reducing the speed limit, design improvements such as these, our study says will improve health outcomes. And these are just kind of examples. These aren't actual, like, we should do this with MLK. That would take a corridor study, of course. Similarly, US 301 between Big Bend and Sun City. Similar sort of improvements, narrowing the traffic lanes, improving street trees, doing mid-block crossings, especially for pedestrians to kind of improve intersection density and improve walkability, encouraging non-car commutes, so greenways, stuff like that. Platte, Cleveland, this is an area with poor mental health outcomes, high asthma outcomes, and just some examples of, doing, moving the bike lane to the interior of the parking lane, having more consistent pedestrian crossings, improving intersection density, increasing the tree canopy, really kind of consistent sort of improvements across the board that can improve health. So some conclusions and next steps, inequities and exposure to traffic, high crashes, air quality, as well as an unequal distribution of wealth and resources is connected to unequal health burdens across the county. Over time, complete street treatments targeted to address these chronic health conditions can help make Hillsborough County a healthier place to live. We'd really like to see the use of our prioritization principles for selecting complete street corridor studies, project funding prioritization, and the use of kind of our recommendations and case studies as a guide for planning the 350 miles of complete streets in our long-range transportation. I know that's all a lot. I'm happy to take questions, and my recommended action is to approve the attached technical memorandums and forward to the TPO board.
All right, thank you. Nicholas, well,
Just a statement. I just really appreciate that you all have put this much time and effort into this and understanding kind of some of these comorbidity issues that we got to see during COVID-19. And yeah, I don't know if this was taken up before the county's equity profile study or if it was in response to it, but either way, I think it's fantastic. How do we make sure that people in the county know that you all have done this work? Because I think they appreciate knowing it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, we'll send it out in our newsletter. I'm happy to work with some of the boards to kind of send it out. And if you all have any recommendations on, making the county residents more aware, I'm happy to take it up.
Yeah, just that maybe we make it very easy and palatable for commissioners to be able to share to their constituents, because I think, a lot of public comment in some of the neighborhoods centers on some misinformation, and I don't think that is taking place. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. One thing we're going to be doing, we have the technical memorandums attached to the agenda item, but we're going to be putting together a brief executive summary, 5 or 6 pages, kind of hitting the highlights, something more graphical, something that really is digestible for the public. So we'll be doing that as well.
Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks. That was very informative, and I'm glad to know people are spending time doing things like this. So appreciate it, Judge. That said, and I've made this comment about presentations like this to us in the past, I'm not sure I understand why this is presented to us as an action item as opposed to an item for our information. If I vote to approve the technical memorandums and forward to the TPO board, quite honestly, I don't know what it is that I am attaching my credibility to when I vote for it. It's a great informational piece, but I have a hard time as an action item. So when I vote against this, if somebody makes a motion, please understand that's why I'm voting against it. It's great for information, not so great for action at this point. Perhaps could have been recast on the agenda more appropriately, in my humble opinion. Thanks.
Good comment. Yes, Christine?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have one question. I have a question about the areas that you mentioned. If we are voting to approve the technical memorandums, does that mean we're voting to approve to have it move forward in these particular areas?
No.
Okay.
These are just kind of localized examples.
Because I questioned the 301 between Vacant and 674, although I almost got killed yesterday on my bike riding in the area.
Yeah.
But there's an environmental justice air community closer to that needs complete streets desperately, and I would rather see resources used there. So as long as we're not voting for these particular areas.
No, these are just kind of examples of how the study can inform kind of the process of future. So if you're take a corridor study or something along those lines.
If that area, if it's not on their radar, we can watch area.
It's on FDOT's radar.
Good. Christine?
Joshua, this is such great information. I really love it. For those of you who have not yet embraced something called health in all policies, it's really making a giant policy improvements in many cities and communities where health in all policies is established as a standard practice. So thank you for reminding us that in 2019 that was adopted. I think sometimes we forget that stuff got voted in. Joshua, can you please go back in your slides to the chart that had like the red numbers on it? There, that one.
The EJ one or the chronic disease?
Next one. Keep going. It listed all of the
chronic disease.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I understand what I'm seeing here. Red is why the red in some spots?
Above the countywide average.
Above the countywide average. Okay. And then can you go advance your slides to where you had the MLK street shown? Thank you.
The proposed improvements?
No, the one before. So I just want to mention or ask rather, because then the next slide does show the proposed improvements, and these are the improvements and the projects that undergo, I mean, years and years and tons of money. Whereas in some instances, not in 301, but in a case like this, there might be an alternative north or south that would be a viable bike boulevard. And that's much less expensive, much quicker to implement. And so I couldn't help but noticing that there are some seemingly parallel streets. So I don't know if that's something that you can incorporate into your messaging, or this, kind of study is that if we want to solve these problems, we don't necessarily have to go for the giant, hugely expensive projects. And then the other thing I wanted to mention on Platt Street, where you show us a slide where you have your proposed changes. Is this one, Platt Cleveland? So I just want to share that the original plan for Platt and Cleveland pairings had the curb of the street, and then a protected bikeway, and then the parked cars. So this is just a matter of moving of paint I mean, I'm oversimplifying because none of this is easy, but it's just repainting so that parked cars protect the people walking and biking and blading and strollering and all that on the street space that has been carved out for that use. That was the original schematic for that space. And at the time, it was kind of new wave. So people did raise Cain over it. So I'm glad to see this as a possibility, and maybe the TPO board would appreciate also knowing that that was the original great plan. We compromised, but now we still have the space. Let's just make it right as soon as possible. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a few comments and questions, if you may.
Yes, who is that?
This is Josh.
Josh, go ahead.
Good. Can you hear me okay? I'm sorry about earlier. My microphone wasn't working.
I think we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. So can you go back to the MLK that we were on, the plan view? Not the street mix, the plan. Yeah, there we go. So, from one Josh to another, I think this is really helpful information. This is a really good study. I think there is a challenge in looking at sort of corridor specific, areas, census tracts, in an abstract, because we all know that this is part of a larger network, and so the network impacts are sometimes outsized on some of these corridors, and in isolation in the abstract that isn't necessarily recognized. So MLK is a perfect example of that. You see all the health indicators are higher than average, and I'm hopeful in the takeaways that you have at the second to last slide where you show all of the technical memoranda. I think that's all really good. However, just on the very left side of the screen, you have I-275, and in the long-range transportation plan, there are current plans for expansion of I-275 throughout this neighborhood. So there is an incongruence between what the LRTP is showing for the highway and this presentation that shows MLK and all of the negative impacts for the increase in car traffic. And so, what I'm concerned about, or what I hope that the TPO is at least aware of and keeping in mind, is that none of these are in isolation, and we can have all of the great technical memoranda listed that says we're going to prioritize projects based off of X, or we're going to put certain things higher than others because we want to have things be safer for environmental justice areas, and that's all great. But at the same time, if we're expanding 275 and doing projects that incentivize and induce demand that are part of that network, it's all for naught, because you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul, essentially. And so you're not really making that same level of impact that you're hoping to make. So if you could go, my last thing I'll say is that I think if you could go to the second to last slide with your recommendations. Again, I think these are all really good overall, but I think it's also perhaps not broad enough, because I think if the board will remember last meeting, I made a recommendation or an ask of staff at the end to start to look at crafting language about induced demand and incentivizing car travel to the same degree that we did for anti-discrimination and social justice. The same sort of equity statement that the board has made in the past and adopted. That this is a clear reason why I asked for that, because you can see that the inequities are there with an exposure to traffic, high crashes, all those other things. And so, in using that as a prioritization principle, as is a recommendation in this slide, we have to then start to have that same level of policy that says we are not going to incentivize additional car trips on the network. So I have a hard time separating those two things. And so, again, I think this is really great. I tend to agree with Rick. I think for informational purposes, this would have been fine. I have a hard time getting to making an adoption or making this recommendation, not seeing that larger level of commitment beyond just sort of the corridor specific stuff. And Josh, I'll let you respond to that. Maybe you have, maybe there's something that I'm missing, but I think it's really difficult to make a statement to one degree on corridors and then have actions and other things and let things slide in the LRTP on the other side of things. So that's all I've got. Thanks.
Josh, you want to respond?
I don't have a particular response. I mean, I think this is kind of a high level set of recommendations that can guide the TPO board's decision making. And I see Johnny has some thoughts.
Yeah, Josh, I'd like to take a stab at that. So the recommendations that Josh Barber is offering to this committee represent a very early but important first step to achieving that long-term goal, or actually dual long-term goals of equity and better health outcomes. So the methodology of identifying the health profile of communities that are near roads on the MPO network is important for us to figure out what treatments we can offer in the long-range transportation plan to help improve those outcomes over time. So what Josh is offering is a method for us to identify neighborhoods that have poor health outcomes and a set of very broad, non-specific recommendations for how to address those health outcomes over time using the tools that the MPO has at its disposal. So the way I envision this working out for the 2050 LRTP, which is due to be adopted in less than 2 years as of today, this methodology will be used in the needs assessment to identify those communities with low health priority or low poor health outcomes. Josh and his consultant will work together to flag those areas, and it'll translate into a tip prioritization process where local governments can bring projects to us. We can use those prioritization metrics to get them on the tip and get those projects some money so that they can be constructed over time. Did I sum that up right, Josh?
That's fair.
All right.
Helpful? Good.
I appreciate that, Johnny. Thanks.
Other questions or comments from the committee?
Minor comment or question.
Yes, Ed,
Would
go
you
ahead.
turn back to the health outcomes slide? Just as a data nerd, there we go. It's the one that shows, with the percent of people that are, there you go. The one with
This one?
no, the one with the table.
The red numbers.
There you go, yeah. As a data nerd, I'm trying to figure out how would you know what percent of people in a given area are obese or
Census.
have high cholesterol, or, it's like it all goes back to data. And as a data nerd, I'm just asking myself, well, okay, where'd the data come from?
Yeah, the Centers for Disease, the CDC collects this data as well as the census.
But at the local, at the
track level.
small, really?
Yeah, at the track level.
Well, how do I know how many people are obese in my census tract?
The CDC collects data on it, so I think they do a survey every few years that collects data. I understand it.
You just ask people if they're fat. I mean, what?
I can
About 15 pounds.
I can dig into it.
Qualifies as obese. So.
They haven't come knock on my door, and I'm sure I am obese, but that is, but I'm not in there.
Yeah.
And I'm in a high traffic corridor. So Ed's point is well taken. Cholesterol, really?
I'd be happy to look into how they collect the data and provide information to the committee on how that's conducted.
I think that feedback would be helpful. Other questions or comments? This is an action. I'm sorry.
This is Terrence Online. Be recognized, please.
Yes, go ahead.
I didn't catch the tail end of what was just said. Did we ask for someone to find out how the CDC collects this information?
Yes, I think that was the general ask, and Mr. Barber said he'd be happy to come back and provide us that information either in a meeting or in a report. Is that fair?
Fair.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, yeah, I just didn't hear that. Thanks. Would you mind going to the 301? I think it included Sun City Center, like the street view. All right, so one of the questions I had was just, because it's here, so it's open for discussion, was golf carts. Where do those fit in the diagram? From what I understand, they're not supposed to be motorized vehicles, are not supposed to be on sidewalks. And I don't know if they're supposed to be in the bike lane.
They're not allowed on that stretch. I live in that area. The golf carts are allowed in certain parts of Sun City Center, but on the US 301 stretch, they are not allowed on the roadway or on that multimodal path. There's no motorized vehicles allowed.
I think that, may I chime in?
Yeah, I want to be sure you heard. Did you hear the answer that Christina offered?
I did.
They are allowed to cross US 301 in one particular place where they cross from Sun City Center across the street to where there's a Walmart. It's called Cape Stone Avenue. They can't cross 301 there. That is the only place they can cross 301 in Sun City.
Good. Christine?
I believe, Mr. Chairman, that the golf carts as vehicle types are not allowed on roadways that have speeds set higher than 35 miles an hour. Is that, I think that's what the criteria is, so it wouldn't be allowed here.
So let me ask you, Christine, if I may, what's your understanding with regard to golf carts? Because there are two types. One are street legal golf carts, which have license tags on them, I think.
Right.
And the second are non-street legal that are used for just running around.
Yeah.
What's your understanding as to where those are permitted? Because I think you're our in-house expert on this.
I believe, and this warrants a little bit more clarification and research, but it's my understanding that at least in the city of Tampa, all golf carts have to be the street legal license tag, proper light front and rear, and licensed driver, you know, in the city of Tampa, but I don't know in the non-incorporated area what the laws would be there.
I believe it's the same in the unincorporated areas, with the exception of Sun City Center and private roads. My
Private roads, yeah.
were gated and private. But within Sun City Center, they are allowed, and you are not required to be a licensed driver. Quite often in Sun City Center, people lose their license for vision reasons or other reasons, and they buy a golf cart, and it's legal.
Yeah.
But there are, so throughout most of Sun City Center, golf carts can be driven, any type of golf cart, without being licensed. However, there are only certain places they can cross. One place they can cross 301, and there are several where they can cross 674, but they can only cross at those. But within the neighborhoods, they're.
Okay. All right. That's right. All right. Thanks for a little side trip down the golf cart lane. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, with that in mind, would it be appropriate to ask for some kind of presentation on, I don't know, the different modes of transportation besides walking, biking, and cars? There's a lot of motorized scooters. How do those fit into our planning? Golf carts, how do those fit into our planning in several communities around here? I don't know if we're thinking about those. You see a lot of kids on, those rocket scooters or whatever, motorized one-wheelers. We're moving into a new age of ways to get around, so.
No, I think your request is appropriately timed. There's a lot of different modes of transportation evolving in our community, and I'll relay that request to staff to come back to us with some sort of clarification on how these all fit together and where they are permitted. Is that fair? Okay. Any other?
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you for raising the issue. This is an action item. If someone cares to make a motion for approval and recommendation to the TPO board, this would be a good time.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept this, but I'd like to also include in our motion that we introduce a caveat that we observe that there are conflicting health related aspects to other parts of the long-range transportation plan. Is that, so we approved this motion. But duly note what Josh Frank stated, that we can't advance health and deteriorate health in the same neighborhoods with different projects.
I think the first part of that was an acceptable motion.
Accepted
Is there,
with the caveat.
is there a second?
I'll second
Christina?
that.
Okay,
Artie
Christina.
Pryor, I'll second.
Artie, we'll take your second, Christina. Any further discussion on the motion with the caveat that make the motion include? All right. Anyone online care to comment before we vote? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of recommending this to the TPO board, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much, committee. Josh, thanks for coming and creating even more chaos. All right. Next action item on our agenda is the Plant City Canal Connector Trail Study. Good morning.
Good morning, CAC, Mr. Chair. This is the Plant City Canal Trail Feasibility Study Final Recommendations presentation, and thank you for your time this morning. Let me just see if I can.
May I ask, because we have some committee members online, if you can speak up so the microphones are sure to pick it up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Let's see if I can zoom in on this a little.
That's your neighbor.
All right, so just moving along to the study area, you should be able to see at the top, that is McIntosh Preserve. About in the middle of this slide is Interstate 4. And then at the south end, we have downtown Plant City, right there along US 92, going down a little bit to the south, also Brook Street. So we divided the study area into 4 zones, and then looked at the alternatives within those zones. They're split up roughly from Knights Griffin Road to Sam Allen Road, Sam Allen Road to I-4, I-4 to US 92, and then south of US 92. So the evaluation matrix looked at each one of those alternatives and scored them on a set of criteria, looking at buildability, about the population alongside of them, and several other factors that we put into there. And then we scored, of course, the highest ones by each segment. And then going through the preferred alternatives based on that scoring, we ended up with the following 4 preferred alternatives. In Zone A, which is at the south, we are starting up along the existing park trail that goes between 2 parks and up to Also Brook. The recommendation is to go east on Also Brook to Thomas Street, north on Thomas Street to Alabama, which is incidentally the Plant City Midtown redevelopment area. And they could take a jog either way, depending on which portion is set to develop first through that area. Then continuing east on Alabama Street to Lake Street, there is a good crossing of the railroad tracks there on Alabama and on Lake Street as you head north, and continuing up to Baker Street. Some of the features of Zone A, we have the existing trail, we have some existing bike facilities that could be enhanced, and a number of existing sidewalk facilities there. Zone B, which continues from north of downtown, connecting up Pennsylvania Avenue to Cherry Park. If we continued, a close second in this alternative is continuing directly north on Pennsylvania, which includes the canal there. The issue there is when you get to the frontage road, you either have to cut back on the frontage road, which is very limited in right of way, or you have to build a overpass of I-4, which is over 200 feet wide in that location. And there are various issues with landing the ramps on both the north and south side of I-4. But as I said, continuing up to the Cherry Street Park at the northern terminus of Pennsylvania, continuing north on Golden Street to Spencer Street, and then continuing on Park Road. There is currently an emergency signal at the fire station at Spencer and Park Road. One of the recommendations is to use that into a full pedestrian beacon as well to cross Park Road. FDOT has a current project to resurface Park Road and also includes urban corridor improvements on that. So there might be some opportunities for some early implementation wins on that. Looking at the features of Zone B, we have some of the existing parks, the canal there in the bottom right, and Sansoni Park, which is on Park Road right there by the fire station. Includes a great facilities, ball fields, and others.
Wait, we can't see the bottom image of.
That bottom image is actually on the next slide.
Oh, okay.
Apologies.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe I can zoom in a little bit so that, well, it's right in the middle of two zooms. Sorry. So Zone C, the preferred alternatives from where I just mentioned at Park Road and I-4, continuing north along Park Road to Sam Allen Road. And then it will be entering that North Park Isles subdivision to the north of Sam Allen. So that's a pretty short segment, right? Some of the features of Zone C, the biggest feature is that we have to cross the I-4 interchange, which will require a great deal of design sensitivity. There are basically two entrance ramps on the south side and on the north side of I-4 there that you have to cross that merge into each other. So really taking care of how we make those crossings and ensuring adequate lighting, adequate markings, and just a number of safety features on that facility. Zone D, as I mentioned, comes into the North Park Isles subdivision. This is currently under development. The city has preserved a easement for the trail, and it basically dead ends in the northwest corner of that subdivision into the existing McIntosh Preserve. So the city of Plant City could choose to make that a paved facility through McIntosh Preserve or to keep it a natural surface facility, but that will be at their discretion. Just looking at some of the features of Zone D. Oh gosh, sorry about the neat image there. I thought we had that already. These are the easements through the existing North Park Isles subdivision. So we did quite a bit of public outreach. We got almost 250 responses on this. We put out this flyer throughout the city. We put up big posters of this flyer that the number also had a paper survey attached to the posters in City Hall and at the City Gibbs Martin Community Center. The QR code here would take you to the website or the web page for the study, which the link for the survey was right there. Anyway, we were really pleased with the response, and I'll get into some of the details of that. 88% of respondents were in favor of a trail. We did have 8% opposed, but I'll say with that, we did have some good ideas. Many of the concerns among the folks opposed had to do with crime or lighting or other potential issues that respondents felt could go along with a trail facility. And those are good recommendations to carry forward. The city, with the initial parts of this trail they've done on the south end of the corridor, has done a great job of incorporating lighting and amenities into those, benches, pedestrian scale lighting, and other amenities at the trailheads, which is part of the reason that we considered trying to connect as many of the parks as possible, because they serve as natural existing trailheads there. So we also asked, what kind of pathway do you prefer? Most people wanted a trail anywhere that it could be feasibly done as soon as possible. Another large group indicated they wanted it to be as far away as roads as possible. We did have several write-ins, among people who were opposed to a trail generally, saying that they were generally opposed. So that's more or less where that other 9% ended up. And what would you like it to connect to? We gave people 3 main options, but also a write-in option. We had a number of great suggestions of various parks and other places, some of which were already along the route, the various routes, but it helps to determine those final which segments work best if people would prefer one connection over another. And then again, the selected alignments that I went through before, this is it all in one. The highest scoring ones here start on the south at Also Brook, work their way up through downtown and over to Park Road to Sansoni Community Park. Incidentally, Hillsborough Community College is immediately to the south of Sansoni Community Park there. So it does make that connection too. And then going north across I-4 and up through North Park House into McIntosh Preserve. The other alignment that starts to score better, because many of these areas are being annexed into the city, is the Maryland Avenue alignment, which is parallel to Park Road, but currently has less right-of-way, but could have more in the future as those annex in, and might be a feasible alternative for the trail, and one with a roadway with lower traffic. So we also came up with a number of typical sections. These help to cost out the project. We have, I believe, 5 typical sections here and a dollar amount per mile on those typical sections. So even as the city chooses to mix and match which route they would like to take, we can still come up with feasible costs or costs to phase in those sections of the trail. So first we have a side path along a local roadway, one with a 21-foot section, really trying to squeeze it in, and one with a 24-foot section. Then a separated path, center aligned or right aligned if there's a ditch associated with it. And then the trail adjacent to the canal. The railing is only required when that fall space is not wide enough to accommodate FDOT requirements. And then a boardwalk section if we have to cross any wetlands. It did come up the last time that doing a slightly wider boardwalk because of just the railings taking up a certain amount. The interior clearance here is meant to be at 12 feet. And then the cost estimates per mile. This is approximately a little over 6 miles, the recommended trail alignment. The total cost on that right now it is just over $11 million. And we can break that down into phases for the city to help with that applications for voting. And so the implementation program, some signage, possibly future home of the Greenway, working with FDOT and Hillsborough County on their roadways, particularly Park Road as they go to resurface it. Looking at some designated sign the connecting parks. That means providing signage at those parks to designate the trail. And the possibility of on some of the lower speed, lower volume roadways having earlier implementation through shared lane markings or roadway restriping. And then after that, moving forward with, well, at the same time, moving forward with design, right-of-way acquisition if needed, and construction. So that is my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, but this is an action item, and I'll take any questions you may have.
So it is an action item, and you're asking us to recommend this to the TPO board as presented?
Yes, sir.
All right. Other questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Christine.
I just have one comment. When I was looking at the number of responses to your survey, when I did a quick ad, and it looked like there's 436 responses. And I would like to commend you for that, because we see a lot of surveys in here from communities, and there's 40, 50 responses from a community. And I'd just like to commend you for getting such a good response.
It should be 240 something, but we were happy with that.
Okay, yeah, that's still
Yes, and some of the things people were allowed to select more than one responses.
It's still pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Glover, did you have a comment?
I was just going to ask, were there any consistent themes in the responses of the 8% that voted no? Any other environmental concerns, or what were you?
Security concerns, mostly security and safety.
I would imagine as a result, maybe some of the recommendations would have emergency buttons along the way.
You know, we have seen that. That is not a specific recommendation. These days, it might be easier to do that because you don't have to have the communications wires between them. It can all be wireless. But we have not done that on any trails that I've been involved with. Largely lighting and going in places where there can be passive surveillance just by people being there is the main recommendation right now.
Stephen, I thought you might have a comment.
Yeah, I want to say I love this project. And the Macintosh Preserve, which is the part at the end, it's the thing this is all built around. It's going to be really cool. It's this massive preserve, and they're building, it'll be similar to Lettuce Lake Park in my mind. There's going to be this boardwalk going through, there'll be a big lookout tower. But it's a great way for you guys that want to come to Plant City more often, get away, do a day trip. Come to downtown Plant City, bring your bikes, and then you can bike up to this preserve, bike around, hike around, go back to downtown Plant City, get some lunch, grab a drink. It's going to be really cool. It's going to tie together a few of the high traffic areas in Plant City, a few of the busy parks with our downtown, and now with this big feature, this preserve.
Christine.
Mr. Chair. Wait, this is awesome. Now, I was kind of looking at Stephen the whole time to get that gauge of like, do we love this? I love this. Okay, good. We all love it. And I think there's some kind of Midtown new development that was also, that's
yes,
coming online.
That's on the south end. It's several square blocks.
Skirts the Midtown project.
I was going to ask you which assets in the community so that we're not having only an investment in recreation, but also in transportation, but you've well covered that. Couple things. Can you go to your image that showed Zone A, the types of treatments that might be used? A question about that one. There you go. Okay, so this lower right-hand image, Wade, do we have any sense of what the vehicular speeds, what's going to be the speed along there?
Yes, the current speed, I believe, is 30 or 35 miles an hour. That is part of the existing Midtown development. They've already done some of the on-road improvements there, but you have vacant blocks to the right of where you're looking.
Yeah, that looks like it might be posted at 30 to 35 and is probably traveled at 40 to 45.
Okay.
So I just would put a little cautionary, like, let's do better there if possible with traffic calming. Then on Zone D, if you could show the Zone D image, same style.
And I would add that these are mostly existing conditions that we're looking at
Yeah,
here. But,
yeah. So this just brought to my attention, and I saw in other images throughout, that we're really not making a big play for shade. And so whenever we can illustrate what we hope we can achieve, I think it gives us, you're literally seed planting every time you show this to people. So let's like do that so that we know that there's shade is going to be a very important element to all along this. And then the other thing I wanted to say is you've done amazing work in the community with counters that determine what the user numbers that are already in place. So can we bake in that counters are going to be installed in this plan so we don't have to beg and do that as an add-on later? Can we try to have it budgeted so that counting devices, this is what's been done in Pinellas County. They have policy that every time they create a trail, counters are part of the design from the first day. So then they have the data when it comes time to reinvest or do more or to spend more money in 10 years. We're going to need counts. So I would like to see that counters are part of the plan from the beginning.
We can certainly make that recommendation to Plan City.
Thank you. Yay.
Thank you, Christine. Other comments or questions? Any committee members online have comments?
No.
Yes, go ahead.
No comment.
Okay. So my question, Wayne, is this is conceived as a trail. I assume that it will be designed in such a way that it will accommodate both pedestrians and bicycle traffic. But having heard our earlier discussion about golf carts, I think you should address that early, either prohibit them or allow them in one form or another. Has that been considered, or have you discussed that?
The funding sources that we have looked at for this are all non-motorized and would not allow golf carts. So that would be a requirement of the funding source to start with. But I have not heard a high degree of interest in about golf carts in Plant City. Other smaller electric motorized modes of transportation would currently be allowed, and the speed differential is higher on some of the e-bikes, scooters, et cetera. And that's a very valid concern that we need to address with these projects.
Well, I'm picking up from my friend Christine's interest in bikes. I think you need to have signage that clearly provides the public guidelines as to how those different modes of transportation can or cannot use the trail. That would be my only concern.
It's a great recommendation. Thank you.
Other comments? This is an action item. We'd be asked to recommend this report and these recommendations to the TPO board. Someone care to make a motion?
I move that Steve make a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Mr. Hollenkamp has made the motion. I believe Mr. Glover has seconded it. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you very much for the presentation. A lot of interest in this project. Okay, we have one remaining action item on our agenda today, and that is the CAC organizational structure. Dr. Wong is going to walk us through this. Thank you for presenting the various summaries in the information packet that we received.
Thank you all. Johnny Wong, TPO staff, your CAC liaison. It's the fourth installment of the CAC organizational structure. Hopefully the last. My fingers are crossed. We'll see what happens. I'm going to take you through recapping the purpose of this initiative. The challenges that we're addressing were identified in the 2018 Non-Discrimination and Equity Plan. That plan recommended that we increase accessibility to meetings. We did that, we believe, by last month, the committee taking action to ensure that this committee meeting remains virtual, allowing folks to, or hybrid, allowing folks to attend virtually and in person. Meeting people where they are was addressed by this committee agreeing to rotate the site of the meetings at least twice a year. And now we're working on evaluating the addition of seats, considering removal of seats, and removing barriers to membership. I already touched on this, but I'll recap the changes that were adopted last month They have not yet been implemented. We don't have a firm timeline on this. I'm kind of aiming for 2023. It makes sense to potentially kick in these changes with the new year, but if we have to delay it to do it right, I'm on board with that. Last month, the committee decided to move the meeting start time to 6 p.m. until 9 p.m., which will allow members time to get home from work, relax a little bit, and then begin the meeting, or to travel here in the evening and then begin the meeting. Again, that meeting format is going to remain hybrid. Staff is going to explore options for alternative meeting platforms so that it feels more like the folks who are attending virtually are in the room. That has been a huge challenge and barrier for folks who are logging on. Sometimes we don't hear them when they speak. Sometimes the audio doesn't work very well. We can't see their faces. Not really sure that they can see us all that well. So we're going to explore and invest in removing those barriers. Again, that meeting location, we're going to host 2 optional social events next year. We're going to rotate the meeting site around the county. That'll allow all of us to get exposed to the different transportation issues facing different parts of the county, because clearly issues facing South Hillsborough don't look much like what's facing what Tampa Heights, Seminole Heights, Town and Country are facing. We want to get exposure to that as much as possible. The attendance requirements will remain the same. We took advantage of that requirement earlier in this meeting, and I think that that mechanism will continue to serve us well as long as we use our diligence and pay attention to the attendance and the commitment of folks who are appointed to this committee. We decided that the quorum is going to remain at 7 in person. So there are 3 issues that we're going to work through today. These were the holdovers from the previous meetings. We did not decide what we want to do with term limits. We didn't decide the geographical distribution or number of seats, and we didn't decide the demographic representation either. So I'm coming back to you today with 2 options for how we can structure this committee. The first is a little bit more expansive. We had the dictate from this committee, mandate, I guess would be a better way to put it, that you all, or that we return to you with an option that retains the appointment of elected officials currently serving on the TPO board. So last month when we presented membership options, both of them were 30 members. Now we're presenting an option that has 42. So under this option, 15 seats will be reserved for demographic groups. 15 seats would be reserved for folks representing districts around the county, specific geographic areas. And in addition to those 30, 12 seats will be reserved for elected official appointees, not including the school board, because that is an at-large seat on the TPO board. And these appointees would be representing, or at least 7 of them would be representing Hillsborough County in an at-large way. With 42 members, we don't see the need for term limits to keep it fresh and ensure that we're getting a diversity of transportation perspectives. With so many folks coming and leaving, we're going to be in constant recruiting mode. We think that this committee will stay up to date on what the current transportation issues are and never get stale. Digging into this in a little bit more detail, how it's going to work in practice. Demographic seats are going to be created based on a countywide profile of census and American Community Survey data. So the census data is collected and provided to us every 10 years. 10 years is a long gap in between getting, or is a long gap for getting relevant data, but the ACS is produced every 3 or 5 years. I can't remember exactly which, but that gives us like the interim data that we'll use to evaluate how well the demographic representation or demographic seats are representing the profile of the county. Those 15 members are going to be selected based on income, gender, race, ethnicity, disability status, and age. Rather than reserving a seat just for folks younger than 30, we are listening to your recommendation from last month saying that we should expand that to include all segments of the age spectrum, so elderly as well. Our goal is going to be to reflect countywide demographic characteristics. We know that we're never going to be able to nail that with only 15 seats reserved for demographic groups. but we're going to reserve a target. So a target of 50% coming from median income or below, 50% reserved for women, 15% for African American, or sorry, 20% for African American, and 30% for Hispanic, and so on. We're going to try to match the data that's coming out of the census and the ACS survey. Every year, we're going to review the membership and use that data, use that evaluation to identify what our recruitment goals will be for the year. So if we see that we're lagging in Asian representation, as an example, that gives us a clear goal for the year: find an Asian representative. All right, so that's how we're going to use this as an action. That's how we're going to use this data to inform our action plan. We will also reach out to community groups that represent these specific demographic interests and ask them to nominate candidates. If necessary that a candidate is nominated, they can reach out directly to us, but that certainly helps us better target those demographic groups. How it's going to work for the geography. We're going to create roughly equal-sized districts based on population using what we think is the most scientific method, a balanced zone GIS tool. I don't want to go too far into the weeds on this, but we're going to set the criteria being, one, that the districts are roughly equal in population and that they're contiguous, and we can add whatever other criteria we want. We think that this would, one other criteria would be to not have too much deviation in terms of what the largest populated district is and the smallest. So we want to minimize that differential. We don't want to have one district with 80,000 and another with 120,000. We want to keep them as proportional as possible. In addition to doing the balanced zone district creation, we're going to reach out to community groups within each one of those districts. Could be neighborhood associations, could be civic orgs, other community-based groups, and ask them to nominate candidates for us. We're also going to review our representation annually and use that to identify our recruitment goals for the year. All right, so that clears up demographic and geographic. The elected officials, this is fairly straightforward. When the reapportionment plan is adopted, or when the new census data is being used to identify elected official representation on the board, the current numbers of 5 BOCC members, 3 city council members, 1 Temple Terrace City Council member, and 1 Plant City City Commission member will change from 10 to 12. So as of next year, there will be 12 appointees. 7 of them are going to come from the BOCC, 3 from the Tampa City Council, 1 from Temple Terrace, and 1 from Plant City. I hope I didn't make a mess of that. There will be 12 elected officials appointing members to serve on this CAC. So we're going to reflect that in option A. Option B is to maintain a membership of 30 members. 15 seats will be reserved for demographic groups, 15 seats for geographic districts. Under this option, because there will only be 30 members, may not be quite as much turnover as with 42, we see the need for limiting terms to 3 terms of 2 years. Demographic seats, there will be 15, just like in option A, based on the same characteristics: income, gender, race, ethnicity, disability, and age. Goal will be the same, to reflect a countywide profile. We're going to review it annually to ensure that we're hitting our targets. Under option B, candidates will need a recommendation letter from a civic organization, no different, or community group. Here's the key difference: the geographic seats. Right? Because we don't have, because we're not just adding 12 seats for appointees of elected officials, we kind of have to marry the geographic seats with the elected official mandate that you all gave us last month. we're still going to break down the county into roughly equal populated districts based on that same balanced zones tool. For each of the districts that are created using these tools, we're going to ask the TPO elected officials that represent that district to nominate a candidate, or at least consult us. So rather than having an elected official just appoint a representative to this committee, we're going to ask them to work with us to identify someone that lives within the districts that we create, rather than the county districts, Tampa City Council districts, Glen City, Temple Terrace. Does that make sense to everyone?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, we're still going to create the districts using our balanced zones tool. So based on today's population in the county, there will be 15 districts. Those districts are not going to match up to Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners districts. They're not going to match up to the Tampa City Council, right? Because we have to look at the entire population of the county. We're going to reach out to the TPO board members that represent our districts. We will have to reach out to a BOCC member, Tampa City Council member. They may have to appoint someone together to represent the districts that we create.
So when you reach out to them, Johnny, we have at-large BOCC members and district members.
Right.
So would you be consulting all of the at-large BOCC members and the district member and try to get a consensus from them on trying to get?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Based on their constituent area, their district, we're going to have a conversation with whoever serves that area. If their districts overlap, EOCC at large, EOCC District 3, Tampa City Council districts that cover that same area, they will all have input on who the appointee is to the CAC.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
would this be the only example of something like that in the county where we've kind of got this hybrid GIS mapping system versus the traditional, single member district areas?
I'm not really sure about that. We brainstormed it. We think it will work. I don't have an example to point to say for sure that it will, but I also don't have a sense of why it won't. Looking to you all for that feedback. I think it could be a little bit complicated, but we've done more complicated things in the past. I wish I could give you more reassurance.
Art, you have a question?
Couple of questions and comments. Johnny, I try to not get kind of emotionally charged about these things, but I'm feeling a little bit of emotionally charged about this. And part of it is because I felt like our instruction regarding the elected officials was fairly clear at the last meeting, that every proposal must have each elected official retaining their appointment power over a member of this committee. And if I'm understanding your explanation regarding the option B, that is not the case. It's kind of this, maybe 2 or 3 members are getting together to, select somebody, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly. And to me, that's kind of a direct contravention of what this CAC at the last meeting gave as the instruction regarding the elected official appointment. So I'm a little disappointed on that front. Beyond that, I don't know how you can necessarily group the electeds into these geographic areas, because you're not going to be guaranteed to get an elected that's on the TPO board in every part of the county. And so what are we doing in those areas where there's not somebody that's on the TPO board that lives in that part of the county? So I'm a little frustrated with that, quite frankly. And this is just a general comment, and I'm not saying that it's the intent. I know you guys work very hard, but I think what's a little frustrating about this process is it seems to me like, the proposals are kind of driven with making this more of a CAC staff driven and developed and selected committee, and that is problematic to me, not because you and Beth and everybody don't do an excellent job of what you do, but I think there is inherent benefit, even if it's frustrating at times, with the kind of the pushback and the debate and the dialogue that comes from you as professionals and staff having a viewpoint on certain items, and then us as members of the community who don't necessarily have your professional training but come with different inputs. I think that dialogue works well, even again, if it's frustrating at times. And so it's a little frustrating that it seems to me, I'm not saying that this is the intent, but it seems to me that a lot of this approach is to try to make this committee more of a committee that's developed by staff, almost in a sense to me is, we would be more of a rubber stamp to what you guys want to do internally, instead of having that debate and dialogue that I think is necessary to produce good results. So that's just some of the problems I have with the current proposals. I'll wait until Mr. Fernandez discusses his, because I want to hear what he has to say about it. But I'm certainly not going to vote to advance either one of these proposals forward based on the current iteration. So I'll yield.
Can I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
Point, I appreciate that you have some concerns about this. I will say both option A and B, in my view, are compromises. Based on the recommendations of the non-discrimination and equity plan, we flagged the elected official seats on this committee as potential seats to get rid of, because the elected officials already represent themselves on the TPO board. We also flagged the representatives of HART, Port, Airport, and VIA because they have designated seats reserved on the technical advisory committee. So some of the seats that are on this committee now are duplicates of seats that may be filled on other advisory committees better. We tried to heed your recommendation. So with option A, even though it's not our preference or the recommendation from the non-discrimination plan, we created the seats for the 12 elected officials on option A. Totally fine, right? It addresses your concern. Option B is a compromise on your end, because although you're not getting direct appointments from elected officials, they will still have a say on who is represented on this committee. So I think both of us are giving up a little, but both of us are also getting something.
Well, I mean, certainly there is give and take here. It's just, because I'm the one that made the motion. My intent with the motion, and how I understood it, would be that when we came back here today, whatever proposals you put forward would include the elected official appointments. So, I mean, to me, we kind of had this debate, and that was one issue that we kind of solved. We haven't solved everything, but I thought we solved as a committee the issue that the official appointments would stay in their current capacity. So that is where my personal frustration comes from. I can't speak for anybody else here. Maybe we need to have another vote to clarify where this is going in the future, and I don't want to monopolize the time.
We returned with the proposal that exactly addressed your motion. So option A does exactly what you requested. Option B is just an alternative. You can vote that down if you don't like it. I mean, again, we came back with an option that wasn't available last month to heed your comment.
But John, this is the last thing I'll say. The motion specifically stated, as I understood it, that whatever options you put forward, they would definitely include the elected officials in their current capacity of appointments. So as I read option B, that is not the case. And you're telling me that this is a compromise position would suggest to me that you would agree that that is not in line with what we voted on. So that's where my frustration comes from. I don't want to monopolize time. I think I've said it enough. You've given your piece.
Thank you, Howard. Mr. Fernandez is right.
Thank you. I'm sure I'll have a lot to say at the end of all of this, but this now is just, I want to get some clarification on the hypothetical that was discussed earlier. Johnny, that you proposed, wherein you would discuss with members of various elected bodies, whether TCC or BOCC, and try to get some consensus among them as to a candidate that they might find acceptable. Might be even a pool of candidates, these 3 or 4 people we think are great, assuming you could get 2 members of the Tampa City Council and 2 members of the Board of County Commissioners to actually agree on anything. But if they did, they might agree on 3 people they thought were great. But at the end of that,
exactly that. I think I would probably send them a sample of a few candidates and have them rank their choice. And based on however many elected officials are representing that district, we would take a look at who they rank 1, 2, and 3 and make the best decision.
Candidates that you, the staff, recruited and generated, much like what we've seen in the past when Rich Clarendon presented us with a slate of candidates and we then ranked them in some fashion and voted for them. Okay.
The only difference now being that we would limit our selection pool to applicants from those districts that are defined.
Okay. So you get this individual or pool of candidates that these elected officials agree would be acceptable, but they do not appoint to this committee. They simply bring back to you the people they think are acceptable. And at that juncture, staff decides among those 1, 2, or 3, or however many candidates who they will appoint. Is that correct? You become the appointing authority. Is that right? Is that the vision?
No, I wouldn't exactly go that far. I think we're going to have to get the elected officials to agree to the terms. So before anyone is appointed, we would ask them, are you okay with this weighting criteria? Are you okay ranking your candidates in order from favorite to least favorite? And
Okay, let's keep the cart and the horse in the appropriate alignment. Right. I was assuming, and perhaps I'm wrong, that by the time the electeds send you back an acceptable slate of candidates, that they've already vetted them for those types of things. And you now are getting an acceptable slate of candidates that you will then select among for appointment. Is that correct? Or am I missing the boat here?
The candidate that is rated the highest by the elected officials representing the district would be selected. I don't envision that we're going to be taking a unilateral, we're going to be selecting candidates unilaterally. We're going to ask the elected officials to send us their preference. If multiple elected officials select the same person, that makes it easy. If they select different folks, we're going to have to ask the elected officials to rank them in order.
And who breaks the tie if there's a tie?
We could always return to the elected officials and let them know there's a tie.
Those would have to be open meetings, right? Those discussions among the elected officials would all have to be noticed in public.
No, I don't think that we're going to have the elected officials sit at a table and work this out. I think we're going to send all the elected officials representing a single district, same list of candidates. They're going to have either their staff or themselves review them, send us a list of candidates in order of who they prefer, and based on which rankings we get back from the elected officials, that'll decide who the appointee is.
Okay.
Okay, move on.
Okay, further, you at a breaking point or were you finished?
I mean, I'm almost done. Under this scenario, we do envision term limits being necessary to keep it fresh.
This is
6 years in total, 3 terms in 2 years.
Excuse me, you're still talking about option B.
Yes, option B. 6 years in total, 3 terms of 2 years. When terms expire, members can reapply for a different seat if they're eligible for it based on demographic characteristics. Our recommendation to you is to approve either option A or B so that we can forward it to the TPO board for consideration of an amendment to the bylaws. The way I envisioned this working for you all so that we can keep this fairly clean and we can all understand each other's concerns and preferences is to just do a round robin, go around the table, everyone say whether you prefer option A or B, why or why not, and maybe that's the best way to hold this vote. But I'll defer to the chair on that.
Okay, and I think that's a reasonable approach, and I do want to offer opportunity for further comment. Rick, let me ask Stephen, comment first.
Well, yeah, so this option C by Rick, I think it's really great. And I think it gets to one of the big things I heard last week from everyone. Just going from the amount of people we have in this committee now to 30 or 40, so many people. Option A and Rick's to option C would be a lot closer if option A just had less people. Why not take the 15 for geographic and 15 for racial, whatever it's called, and make them 9? I know we're still at 30, which is Rick's. There's still a couple differences, but I used to feel everyone would feel a lot more comfortable about option A if it was just
vote less people. Yes.
Okay. Rick Fernandez, you're up.
Yeah. I think I made the comment at the last meeting, and I'll reiterate it today, although the options have changed. I won't be supporting either option A or option B. I submitted option C via email. I handed it out in writing to each of you here in the room. Hopefully the people who are virtual had a chance to check their emails. I sent it last night at about 11 o'clock, because that's when I finally got it done. Simply based on the premise that if you're going to complain about something, you ought to offer a solution. So this is my effort to offer a solution. And my effort, my goal was to stay as close as possible to the existing structure, which I don't frankly think is broken. But recognize that we have issues that we're trying to address regarding diversity on both the geographic and the diversity side of the equation, ethnic side, equality side, equity side. These are all very critical, and I recognize that, which is why in option C, I suggested that we expanded our at-large appointments. We now have 6, that we expand them to 13. And that within that at-large appointment pool that we focus very clearly and distinctly on the various diversity issues, geographic and equity issues that we've already identified. The issues are there. We simply need to pick them and use them as part of our decision-making process, which we have not. I'll say this. We as a committee have absolutely no actual authority. I think we all appreciate that and understand. Our sway, however, as a committee, our culture, even if you will, over the 7 years, 6 years, whatever, since 2017 that I've been here, is that we have an ability to originate and deliver well-vetted and thought-out recommendations to the TPO board. We're known, I believe, for our independence. We ask hard questions. We challenge presenters. We challenge proposals. We push back. One member of the TPO staff in January went so far as to define us as the rowdy committee, which I gladly embraced. Yeah, we are. We also have at-large appointments, which give us some level of authority in terms of selecting who actually sits at this table with us. We don't have the final word, but we can make recommendations for the at-large appointments. And right now we have 6. I'm suggesting we expand it to 13. Both of the recommendations that have been proposed by the TPO staff gut all of that. We lose our authority for at-large appointments. We basically lose all authority completely and cede it to the TPO staff, which in my mind injects a level of conflict of interest, which is inherent throughout both of these processes. We are a screening mechanism. We are, like with the All for Transportation, we're something of an independent oversight committee is the way I look at it. You present things, we're citizens, we respond back. We should not be selected, nor should the TPO staff have a hand in selecting us. You report to us. We bring back our recommendations to you and to the board. It's inherently a conflict for you to be involved in the process of both recruiting and selecting, as you suggested. So, and the size issue, for the love of God, 42, really, at one point you were talking 60. 30 is already pushing the edge of the envelope, in my humble opinion. 42 is not a committee meeting. That's a town hall. I've made that comment earlier. It applied to 60, it applies at 42. I was hard pressed to get to 30, but if you use the 30 in order to populate a diverse group, using those at-large representations, I think maybe we get closer to getting where we want to be. So I don't think A or B are ready for prime time at all. C, I'm sure, could use some additional work, discussion, and massage. I would encourage you folks not to accept either A or B. If you don't want to accept C either, that's fine. but don't send a recommendation to the TPO board at this juncture. This is not ready. And if you accept A or B, I'll tell you now, you are gutting us as an effective committee.
Ed, you're recognized.
Yeah, I like a lot of what Rick's put together here. One thing I disagree with is the issue of conflict of interest, because I think I've seen conflict of interest when this committee has selected members. I think, at the national level, without getting too political here, I'm fearful that there's an effort at the national level. If we're afraid we may not like the outcome, we're going to affect 2 votes. And I'm afraid I've seen that on this committee. When people are presented to us, if we didn't like they were going to vote on a particular issue, but we're not going to allow them. So we've had an opportunity by us selecting to basically feather our own nests.
Okay, I'm going to pause just a moment,
Yes,
Troy, if I may, and see if there are comments.
But I like a lot of it. Other than that.
Yes, I have.
From online. Go ahead.
May I offer my comments?
Yes, please. Who's this?
Who's speaking?
Okay, this is Aya Yassin, City of Temple Terrace.
Go ahead.
So I just want to say that I do appreciate and I agree that a change is needed for this committee, but I don't agree with option A or B. So because of the things that Rick talked about and other concerned members and all the questions that have been raised, it seems that this is not ready for a decision today. And I recommend that we have a workshop or a discussion session to come up with better options that we all agree on, that will include ideas from the TPO staff as they have maybe reviewed some successful citizen committees around the country and some examples of how these can operate. But I don't agree with either A or B, and I don't think we are ready for an option C either. We need to do a lot more research and sit together and discuss all the options.
Okay. Thank you for that comment. Boy, I'll leave you with that.
I would defer to Steve before I comment, just because I almost said that.
Stephen Hollenkamp, you're recognized.
I did, I guess what I said wasn't memorable.
Yeah. You like option C?
That's right.
No prompting.
I think we're making changes here because of the equity thing we did, right?
Yeah.
Any decisions to make changes to something should always be compared to status quo. We may want to make major changes to the county and how we do things for equity justice, but maybe it doesn't apply here. Maybe what we have here is fine. And that option, if we're going to do a choose A or B, the Rick's option could be C, but there should also be an option to do nothing. Maybe I would rather do nothing than any of this. And maybe the majority of the board feels that way. And I don't want us to make a decision to make a change just because we think we have to, when no one actually likes the change. So, yeah, my comment.
Nicholas Glover is recognized.
Question and a thought for the institutional folks who've been here a while. Can you talk to me for a second about term limits, why we have kind of shied away from that? And the second thought, and that's directed probably to you, Rick, is what about the idea of term limits for appointments made by elected officials? And so, if you're appointed by elected official and they term out or they are not elected, that you kind of go with them. Whereas with the appointment of an organization, HART, for example, that be evaluated in your language where, every 2 years you're kind of looked at, making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. So I'll get your thoughts.
I think the question was addressed to Rick today. Go ahead.
Man.
Yeah.
Nick, I'm sorry. Could you diagram that paragraph for me and just pose one question? I'll answer it, then pose the second one.
First question on term limits. I love the institutional knowledge, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But why would we not have term limits of the appointed folks from commissioners or city councilmen and women or mayors mirror what their term limits are.
Okay. My response to that is we already have term limits. The problem we have, with all respect to all those people above me in the food chain, is that we don't adhere to them. We have people sitting on this committee right now that are serving well beyond their existing term limits and, beyond their 2 years. I suspect that their appointing authorities, whether they be HART or Guido Maniscalco or Harry Cohen, not that Harry, I don't think Harry Cohen's appointee is overturned, but in any event, I don't think those appointing authorities realize that their appointees are over term limit. And the answer to the question is, at the 2-year term, the appointing authority should be advised, all right, your appointee has termed out, you want to reappoint them. This is their history in terms of attendance. Talk to them, see if they're still interested, et cetera, et cetera. If they're still interested and they choose to appoint, they can appoint. If they've been absent 6 times in the last 8 months, maybe they want to consider reappointing. But the way we currently operate, that individual who's been absent for 8 meetings could stay around for 3 or 4 years because nobody ever does anything about it. We have rules in place in order to police ourselves if we simply use them. That's at one level. The other is the one you suggested. Our term limits are the limits of our appointing authorities if they're elected. I think it was a Joe Wagner that just stepped off. He was on for 20 years plus on the TPO board. I imagine he could have had a member on the CAC for 20 years if he wanted to, but it's tied to him and it's tied to that appointing agency. I don't really have a problem with that, frankly. This is a tough committee. We see a lot of information. It takes time to get your feet under you so you can even be remotely competent. And if you've been here 2 years, you're more effective than in your first meeting. I've been here 7 and I'm still learning. So I think there's a lot to be said for continuity and consistency. I don't know. Was there another piece to that question?
No, that's it. I kind of led to a little bit. The reason why I'm asking is, and the same reason why I'm asking Johnny about the consistency of other committees is I just like consistency. If it's a county citizens board or whatever happens to be, I just would love for them all to be the same. If someone's appointing a member as an elected official, some committees term out when that person, their term is over. I'm just curious why we're not all doing the same thing versus these committees that have ad hoc kind of rules. But for this one, I agree with you that there's so much information that maybe this is an exception. I don't know, but just trying to get a.
Nicholas, let me take a stab at answering and clarifying one thing that you said. We have term limits now. Elected officials make an appointment, when those elected officials are no longer on the TPO board, that appointee is excused from the committee. Those are members of this committee that are not appointed by elected officials serve for 2-year terms and are subject to reappointment by whatever appointing authority they make, whether that's at large or whatever.
Sure.
But I do want to correct what Rick said a moment ago. The appointing authorities that are not members of the TPO board as elected officials. Let me use this example. The Port, HART, Airport, and THEA have been told by the planning staff that because the TPO itself is going through reorganization, don't renew those appointments. That's the case in my case, for example. My term expired in June. I've asked repeatedly for the Aviation Authority to reappoint me. They said, we'd love to, but we've been instructed not to. So we're in this transition period. I didn't think you were aware. So our membership at this moment is somewhat tied to the membership of the TPO itself. I hope that helps.
It does help. Actually, is my exact question.
Boy, did you have a question?
If they're done, yeah.
They're done.
I had a question for Rick. So in terms of number 7, so my recollection was that, because we voted on this a couple times, that you were one of the people that voted in favor of not having the essentially appointments on this committee from the Aviation Authority, Expressway Authority, et cetera. So I was going to ask them why I haven't this proposal.
Well, because I am nothing if not someone trying to find common ground, all right? In response to what Ed had to say earlier, actually. Yeah, I mean, I am on the side of the fence that says that elected folks ought to be the ones represented here as a Citizens Advisory Committee. But I can also tell you, sitting here to the left of my friend Bill and, with Ed down here and Don, these are folks that I frequently disagree with on issues, but I really enjoy having them here because I think our work product at the end of the day is much more valuable, and our vetting of issues is much more valuable, and ultimately our recommendation, however it goes to the board, is more valuable to them. So I like having these people here. I like being able to have that debate. So I thought in the spirit of trying to stay as close to what we currently have now, but yet expand for diversity reasons, that we would honor that. So I stepped away from my earlier position as to this. And I think A and B would both exclude these folks, if I remember correctly. C would include them.
Christine, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say a couple things. First of all, I echo verbatim Hoyt's remarks earlier about the frustration of having passed a motion at our last meeting and then having it seemingly not adhered to as reflected in options A or B. I will not be voting to advance either A or B. I do like the option C that has been created, and I also think we might sort of have a floating option D, which would be Mr. Hollenkamp's remark that we always have an option, which is keep the status quo or do nothing as an option. My question is, and I also am an enormous supporter of having more diversity and having a CAC that reflects the citizens of this county. So we do need to assess that we are matching the people who live here and that we want to do good work for. I wonder if we've ever done an assessment of who we are already in this committee. As an example, I would consider myself a woman, and I would consider myself a business owner operator. These are some of the categories that we want to address. I think we have 2 or 3 people that are already on the committee that have sort of multiple identifications that do satisfy some of the things. And I think it would be appropriate to survey existing CAC members and say, how do you self-identify as a variety of personhoods that we all occupy in our community, to understand, well, what do we already have represented here? Other than the under 30, I think we have a variety of boxes that are checked to ensure diversity. So I'd like to see us consider that before we better understand it, I should say. Who do we already have on our committee that are fulfilling dual or triple designations?
I appreciate that, Christine. We actually have done surveys on this membership in the past. So in preparation for the 2018 non-discrimination plan, we took a look at the demographic data on this committee. 70% were white, which is 20% greater than the countywide profile. Very few African-American representatives at that time. We need to aim for about 20% on this committee. Handful of those identifying as Hispanic and Latino, we need to aim for about 30% on this committee, so we weren't coming close to that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably 0 of us from below median household income, which is $60,000 for a household. Nowhere near coming close to the percent of folks under 30. 0 Asian representatives. I mean, this is just a few years ago. So you can see that
2018.
these recommendations aren't coming from nowhere. When we surveyed this committee, we saw that there was a deficiency. We're not coming anywhere close to achieving the countywide profile that I think we all agree we need to aim for.
I just would,
So-
thank you. I would like to request that that be refreshed so that we know real time
Yeah.
today, how are we doing?
I don't feel a strong ownership over option A or B to the point where I'm going to say it must be these two. But I will say, cursory glance at option C, there were no seats reserved for those below median household income. I will also note that despite staff encouraging board members to fill in the gaps, to select candidates to help us achieve true representation, despite our recruitment efforts and the candidates who are applying, we've never come close to that. It's not as if we have not had these conversations with the appointing authorities. It's not as if we haven't raised this issue in the past. Every single committee that received the presentation for the non-discrimination plan agreed with it. It was adopted by the board. And I think we have an opportunity to do better. I don't think that the CAC is performing poorly at all. I'll remind you that I asked for this appointment because I appreciate the diversity of perspectives. But when I look around the room, and I'm asking you all to be honest with yourselves, do we in this room represent a cross-section of the entire county? And I think the answer is no.
That's fair. And I think, at least I hope you've gotten the sense, Johnny, that the committee generally agrees. We're trying to find a way to reach a better representation level in categories that are not adequately represented.
Mr. Chair?
Right.
Excuse me.
Someone online have a comment?
Yeah, this was Terrence.
Terrence, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm a fan of option B with the caveat that I need a better understanding, and I think this is where a workshop would come in handy, a better understanding of the selection process, the recruitment process, how that would go. But I love the expanded demographic representation and the geographic representation. The issue I have with elected officials is we are not talking to every or using they won't be a committee member for every elected official. So which of these elected officials represent Gibsonton? And if they represent Gibsonton, do they represent also a part of Tampa or something, like in a certain county commissioner example? So Tampa, for example, would be way overrepresented compared to the rest of the county if we use the elected officials as well. So I would like to have a workshop. Missy Yassine recommended that. I think it's worth having so we don't waste time trying to solve this on the call today. But option B would be my preference, with a full understanding and CAC maintaining a piece of the selection process of the candidate. I'm not saying it's not there, Johnny. I'm just saying I want to make sure it remains, because Rick does have a valid concern. I just don't know if option C is the best way to address those concerns.
Thank you, Terrence.
Thank you.
You're recognized.
I have a comment and I'm going to make a motion, assuming there's no other debate.
My hand's been up.
Well, yeah, I think before we have a motion, Johnny asked if we could go around. We're kind of going around the room anyway, but I want to be sure everybody has a chance to at least make a closing argument.
Okay, well, so the one comment I want to make is
I'll come back.
I feel like what we're doing right now is basically a de facto workshop at each meeting. I don't know that we need to have a separate meeting just to have a workshop on this issue. So that would be my perspective. I think we're working through it slowly but surely. So I wouldn't vote for a special workshop to handle this one.
Okay. I think.
May I speak, please?
Yeah, someone online wants to speak. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Yassine. I'm the one I'm recommending the workshop, and then that's because not all of us are very familiar with the bylaws and the process, and having the time, a lot of time that we can all sit in one room, that we're all available and sit in one room and have the time to look at all the bylaws and what the current process is and provide improvements. Having a workshop is important because right now we cannot do it on the fly. We cannot do it on the fly, and we not all of us know all the bylaws. So we definitely need a workshop, and we need more time to make such a decision, to look at all the different processes and look at all the different recommendations, and also look at all and what everybody, like other committees and around the country, are doing. Maybe we can make a big change that will, or maybe we can have like an innovative idea that we can all do better. I cannot believe that you guys or any member is actually saying that what we have is is great, because as I addressed my earlier concern is that I'm unable to attend the meeting because the meetings are actually during my work time. So this meeting is only geared towards the people who are wealthy enough, who are able, who are maybe retired, who have the time and the money to be out, to be attending and giving their voice. That is a disproportionate way of having a committee. So please do not tell me that this meeting is equitable, because it's not equitable to not only the people who are on the committee themselves, but also there's so many voices, such as the community of Gibsonton or Waimama, who are not being represented at all. So please, we need a change, and we need to all understand that we need to change, and we need to have everybody's voice there, because we are the Citizens Advisory Committee. We need to be having a voice from every different committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Of course, that's part of what's driving the change in meeting times.
Which was approved. I don't know that
She
could you
may
please
not.
reiterate that? She was not able to make it, so please.
Johnny,
Yeah,
touched on
in response to a comment you made at last month's meeting, the committee approved a change to move the meeting start time to 6 p.m. And so for those, I know that this has gone on for a number of months, so maybe more than one of you have missed some of the installments. But at the first presentation, we did bring some ideas to the table modeled after successful citizen-led advisory committees around the country. Some of the examples that we presented were from Polk County. They have a citizen advisory network of like 400 some members. We took a look at Broward TPO, which has another citizen committee of around 60, I believe. So based on the feedback that I received at that first meeting, we've kind of whittled away at each subsequent meeting to where we've landed here. As you can tell, we have achieved some consensus on some of the topics: moving the meeting start time, rotating the meeting site, hybrid. These last three items that we're talking about today are the last three that have not achieved consensus. So I brought back some proposals. I'll implore you all to take a look at option A. I don't have a vote here, but I do think that that's the one that marries your requests best with the staff recommendation. It retains the 30 members, 15 geographic, 15 demographic, and also adds the seats for the elected officials. And another point that maybe I forgot to mention is that I really hope whatever happens, A, B, C, D, E, if it happens now or in a few months, that we would have some continuity of those members who are currently serving. I'm not expecting that we're going to adopt the changes and everyone's going to be kicked off. I think that Rick made a comment about the personalities around the room and how you appreciate their perspective and you develop this rapport. Well, you all would have first crack at sitting in one of the demographic or geographic seats. We've made that clear in the past as well. Every sitting member of the CAC would have right of first refusal for the newly created seats. And if there are conflicts between geographic districts, one of you could move to the demographic seat. There are a number of ways that we could draw this up, but I'm hoping for consistency, much in the same way that I think you all are.
Thank you, Johnny. Before Hoyt makes a motion, I think I want to give Christina
Yeah.
and also Don an opportunity to speak if you choose. Okay.
Thanks.
See, Josh has asked to be recognized.
I just have a few things. First, I do not like option B at all. I just think it's too complicated, trying to get the board members and the VOCC members and to come to agreement. I don't like that at all. I also don't like the term limits on there. The one thing I do like about A is the fact that we do have enough people that we don't need term limits. And as being probably the most recent appointee to this committee, member of this committee, I learned a lot from the people that have been here, that have put in the time and the effort. And I learned so much, and I'd hate to see that go away by strongly enforcing these term limits. So I do like, my first thought, 45 sounds like a lot. We don't get 100% turnout. I think it would be reasonable, and I like the fact that by doing that, we can eliminate the term limits. Another thing I'd like to see is having our committee approve people, that the appointees. Right now, they would just, I don't know if it would be staff that approves them in their year, or would they still have to go to the transportation TPO board to be approved? But I think it would be helpful if we had an approval process as well. I'm concerned about when the staff will reach out to community groups about which groups you go to. I think it would be helpful if we go that route, that we see those groups and we can recommend which groups should be making those recommendations. And those are my comments on option A. Option C, option B is just, option C, what I see here on option C is it's going to be really hard to get our diversity. I live in Waimama. Waimama is primarily Hispanic community. You know, there is not enough Hispanic representation in this community at all. If we capped it at 30, that's another thing. If we go to 45, maybe 50 more. If we cap it at 30, we need 9 Hispanic representatives on the board, at least 9. And we're not even close to that. And I don't know how with option C we could really get that and get that representation. But other than that, I do like a lot of C. If somehow C and A could be melded in some way.
Thank you, Christina. Don, I wanted to give you a chance before I entertain Hoyt's motion.
Yeah, I like option C, and if someone makes a motion to proceed with it, I vote for it. I won't vote for A or B though.
Okay. Hoyt, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, so my motion would be as follows, that the committee reject options A and B outright with instruction to staff to develop 2 additional proposals that reflect the already voted on restrictions and instructions as given by the committee, and that option C be moved forward with further debate about its finalized content, and that there be an option D, which is a no change option in which staff presents a report on what the no change option would do in terms of fulfilling the stated geographic and demographic goals that we're trying to meet.
Wait, is that one motion or?
That is one motion. There's no way to kind of get it tight.
Yeah. Johnny, you want to comment before?
Yeah, so Beth Altman, the executive director, just came up and suggested that if we're doing an annual review to identify our recruitment goals, we could ask the committee for input on what our priorities will be for selecting candidates. So that would be a great time to receive feedback from you all about which community groups you think we should be looking to for recommendations. That'll take a little bit of onus off of us to solicit candidates from these groups if you identify groups that we should reach out to.
All right, sorry for having done that, but is there a second to Hoyt's motion?
I'll second his motion.
I have a second.
I challenge you to restate it. way, but I like what you said.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I think we've got the gist. We're not gonna-
I like 4 or 5 elements. But I can't vote.
what I thought there was 4.
I'm sorry?
I thought there was 4, but
What I jotted down was to have staff come back with 2 additional proposals that reflect the requirement for 12 or for elected officials currently serving on the TPO board to give additional scrutiny to option C and consider that as a proposal, and to evaluate a no change option D.
And to reject A and B outright.
Reject A and B out.
yeah.
That was the first piece.
See, I look at rejecting A and B and having them develop 2 new is kind of one thing, so.
Back to the drawing. Okay, so the motion is to reject the 2 proposals as they've been presented and to ask staff to come up with these additional proposals.
Correct.
Okay. We have a second on that motion.
Yes.
Is there other discussion on the motion? Because I don't think we're going to resolve this today. There are a couple of components that we might agree on, but I'd rather deal with them next time. Christine, were you wanting to make a comment?
Josh.
Josh, did you want to make a comment? I'm sorry.
Josh Frank, are you?
You made the request at 10:11.
Okay.
Can I,
Missing our colleagues.
can I make a comment?
Yes, who's that?
Yes, this is Aya Yassin again.
Go ahead.
I would like the committee to consider having a workshop to discuss the other options that were proposed in that motion, please.
Okay. Well, I think that you made that suggestion. We have a motion now with a second to start over. I think.
Can I add to the motion?
You can offer an amendment to have a workshop if you'd like. I'll entertain that.
Yes, I would like to offer an amendment to add a workshop requirement from the TPO staff to have a workshop for the CAC members to discuss further options C and D and other options.
Okay, we have an amendment offered. Is there a second to the amendment?
I second that amendment.
Christina Costa seconds the amendment. All in favor of the amendment to include the request for a workshop in the main motion, please say aye.
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 I think I'd like to have a roll call vote on the amendment just to be clear. Gail, are you still there?
I am.
Roll call, please.
Bill Roberts,
Yes.
Rick Fernandez,
Sure, why not?
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
Hoyt Prindle,
No.
Christina Bosworth,
No.
Miaza Morrison,
Yes.
Aya Yasin,
Yes.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
Yes.
Christina Costa,
Yes.
Artie Fryer,
Yes.
Nicholas Glover,
Yes.
Don Skelton,
Yes.
Ed Mrajewski,
No.
Terrence Trott,
Yes.
Joshua Frank.
Yes.
The amendment passes 12-3.
Right. We have an approved amendment to include the request for a workshop to work on this item. I'd like now to take a vote on the main motion, which was Hoyt's motion, which included the 4 points. Gail, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote on the main motion as amended amongst the committee.
Bill Roberts,
Yes.
Rick Fernandez,
Yes.
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
Hoyt Prindle,
Yes.
Christina Bosworth,
Yes.
Miaza Morrison,
Yes.
Aya Yasin,
Yes.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
Yes.
Christina Costa,
Yes.
Artie Fryer,
Yes.
Nicholas Glover,
Yes.
Don Skelton,
Yes.
Ed Mierzejewski,
Yes.
Terrence Trott,
Yes.
and Joshua Frank.
Yes.
The motion passes 15-0.
All right, thank you very much.
You get a freaking plaque for that.
Nobody remembers us.
So now the
There's a
difficulty-
strategy to everything.
so now the difficulty is in finding a workshop. I'm assuming that the committee would be willing to have that workshop in the evening. Is there any objection to that?
Could we try to do it how we did the one from, we did a workshop a while
Tip.
back, yeah.
We did the tip workshop, like 5 people showed up for it, but maybe this will get more. That'd be great.
I think we ordered pizza here and did it right after one of our meetings. That way we could have lunch and everything.
I think we should include those who are coming from greater distances and have other work obligations during the day in the discussion.
I'm asking the committee if there is strong objection holding this workshop in the evening. I don't care what time it is.
Right.
But that would afford some of our members a chance to come. And Rick is right, we did not have tremendous participation on our after the meeting workshop on the 10th. Any strong objection to having it in the meeting, having the workshop in the evening? Staff? Gonna comment?
No, we agree.
Sorry, I'll send out a Google poll to get dates and times for the majority of folks.
And I'm assuming that we were trying to have this workshop prior to our next meeting in November. Okay,
Yes.
all right. Thank you all for another lively discussion. Appreciate your input. You see the difficulty in drawing legislative and congressional districts now. So the next item on our agenda is to move to unfinished business and new business. Our next meeting is November, preceded by a workshop on CAC membership. Are there recommendations or do we need to take a vote on next month's agenda topics? Anybody have any suggestions? Yes, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a conversation with Commissioner Kemp regarding changes to the I-275 proposal from Hillsborough to Bears Avenue that FDOT has put out. Unfortunately, due to timing, I wasn't able to get that in front of the committee today. I discussed with Johnny, but due to kind of the precedent of not dumping a bunch of pages on you guys the night before, we didn't get to it today. But I do think it's something that we should discuss at the next meeting, and then perhaps Johnny can circulate these documents that I provided, because there's several new changes, it looks like, from the mock-ups that FDOT has prepared that would probably surprise this committee, one of which is this, I know everybody can't see it, but this proposed section of 275, which includes not only an additional lane, but a 15-foot lane, presumably for BRT, which has not been in.
Where's that?
This is in the slides I
I know,
have.
but where, north of Hillsborough?
Between Hillsborough and Bears, I think.
Yeah, that's what the whole
Absolutely, let's add this.
slideshow is. So I think it would be useful, and I know.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Next agenda. So
Thank
next agenda will be 275 north of Junction and CAC composition.
I can't commit to next month, so Hoyt, as I mentioned, right, that presentation was produced by us. We're going to be making that presentation on some LRTP scenarios to the board next Wednesday. If anyone can attend, I would encourage you all to hop on and view the presentation for the first time. That's going to be presented as a status update to the board. At that meeting next week, the board's going to decide whether they want to initiate an LRTP amendment or not. If they decide that they want to initiate that amendment, there's an entire public engagement process that we have to follow. And since it's an LRTP amendment, we're required to bring that presentation to this committee, but we're not required to bring it back next month. We've already had conversations with some board members, and they think maybe the timing wouldn't be right because there's going to be so much going on in November. So tentatively, we've kicked around the idea of December, January. But regardless, it's a requirement that we bring that presentation to you all before the public hearing. So you will see it one way or another, just maybe not November.
Well, my ask would be for it to be at least, even if it's not a detailed presentation, but maybe a cursory overview, given the importance of that stretch of freeway to this committee. I mean, years of discussions on it, including on a personal level with some members who live by it. And so that is my request. And that also comes from above me and my appointing officials. So what the committee chooses to do that. But it's,
and I would request whether it's a formal presentation, that at least whatever is shown to the TPO board at the next meeting regarding this issue be provided to them.
Yeah, we can.
At least we'll have
the board addendum, the addendum for next month.
Okay.
But like I said, I encourage you all to view the board meeting next week.
Any other topics for next meeting? Any other new business to come before the committee? Christine.
Mr. Chair, I just want to perhaps echo the member remarks from last time to make sure they're on track for the appropriate municipality. Mr. Prindle pointed out the faulty roundabout on A and Palm, North A and Palm. There's a weird slip lane that is causing a lot of confusion and makes for a dangerous situation. He brought that up. I brought up the intersection of Mabry, Henderson, and Morrison Avenues. And so perhaps next month, if we could just have a little ping on whatever is happening or not happening on addressing those.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Rick Fernandez?
Just one question in terms of schedule. Is December a regular meeting for us, or do we have some kind of a special holiday meeting or what?
I think we're going to do the joint TAC-CAC meeting like normal. I'm not sure what the date or location is, but I think that's what we're going to do.
So it will be a substantive meeting, but it will be with two committees.
I'll have to check what agenda items we have on tap. That may change given the LRTP amendment that could come forward. It's too early to say for sure. I'll keep you in the loop as that develops. We'll know a lot more next Wednesday with course direction.
One other. Yes, Steve.
When did the 6:10 meeting start?
No implementation date yet. Some months ago when I presented this, I assumed that we would kick that off in 2023, but now I'm not so sure. Yeah, we haven't set time yet to begin the evening meetings.
I think
Begin
that's
that
part.
separate, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Christine.
Can't we begin that separate from the other changes? I mean, that doesn't have to be part of the whole committee change, does it? Can it be separate?
I think it does because in January, you all approved the CAC meeting calendar. So that's the only reason why I thought it was important to wait until January so that we don't have to do another motion to adjust the calendar.
No, sorry, I probably didn't phrase that very well. I mean why we shouldn't have to push it out beyond January. We should not have to wait until this whole structure is changed, correct?
Yeah, you're right. No, I don't think we have to wait for this entire reorganization to wrap up if there are any changes to the committee structure at all. I'm just not sure if we'll have the time to get that straightened out. We usually start developing the meeting calendar around November. So it's not out of the question that we could begin the evening meetings in January, but again, like there's a lot of other things to consider as well.
Okay. Any other new business to come before the committee? Hearing none. Anyone online have anything?
Nope, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Covered a lot of territory.
We did get there a lot. I'm good. I walked.